Garrett County Board of Education.
I'll explain.
And our first order of business is public comment. Is there any public comment? Thank you, Dr. Woods.
Sure.
No public comment. All right, then we'll move on to executive session. Under the general provisions of Article 3-305B, public bodies can go into closed session to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction, and any other personnel matter that affects one or more specific individuals, to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice on a legal matter, to conduct collective bargaining negotiations or consider matters that relate to the negotiations, and before a contract is rewarded or bids are open, to discuss a matter directly related to negotiating strategy or the contents of a bid or proposal if public discussion or disclosure would adversely impact the ability of the public body to participate in the competitive bidding or proposal process. Our topics to be discussed under number 1 is professional leave request, certificated staffing recommendation, personnel update, and superintendent goals. Under number 7 is an update from the legal counsel regarding breach of warranty claims regarding repair work at schools. Under number 9, negotiations is the parameters for negotiations with the teams. And under 14, it is strategic planning RFP interviews. These matters are going to be discussed in closed session rather than open for the personnel topics because they include a discussion of specific employees, which is a confidential employment matter. The legal advice topics, because we are receiving specific legal advice from counsel that's protected by attorney-client privilege. Under collective bargaining, because it is the confidential nature of the negotiations process. And then the procurement topic, because the board can discuss the contents of the various proposals. Specifically, we wish to discuss matters in closed rather than open because public discussion or disclosure could adversely impact our ability to participate in the proposal or procurement process. With all that said, is there a motion to go into executive session for those stated reasons?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Woods. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Siebold. Been moved and seconded to go into closed session. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. We are in executive session. You're able to, please stand, and we'll have a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda for tonight?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve tonight's agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the agenda being approved, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The agenda is approved. Next item is the consent agenda. On that, we have the certificated staffing recommendation. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Zinker. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Gladfeldy. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The consent agenda is approved. Next, we have the February 13th, 2000. Actually, we are in February 13th, aren't we? This should be January, right?
Yeah.
Approval of the January 8th. January 8th, 2000. And there's a typo on the top of this meeting, and then it says 2018. It should be 2019.
Oh, on the minutes. Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
did you get an opportunity to look at those? Any corrections, other corrections or additions? Is there a motion to approve with that one correction? Please, motion.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Woods. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Siebold. Any other further discussion?
No.
All those in favor of approving the amended minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. They are approved. Closed session summaries.
Thank you. The Board of Education met in executive session on Tuesday, January 8th, 2019 at Central Office in the boardroom at 4:20 p.m. under Authority 3-305 of the General Provisions Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland to discuss the following items. Review executive session minutes, personnel topics pursuant to 3-305B1, collective bargaining negotiation topics pursuant to 3-305B9, procurement topics pursuant to 3-305B14, legal topics pursuant to 3-305B7, and administrative function topics, which are specifically excluded from the Open Meetings Act by virtue of 3-103A1I of the General Provisions Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland. Tom Woods made a motion to close the meeting, and this was seconded by Rodney Glotfelty. Thereafter, the board unanimously voted to close the session with a yea vote from Rodney Glotfelty, Monica Rinker, Charlotte Seabold, and Tom Woods. The closed session began at 4:20 p.m. The topics discussed and actions taken include the following. Executive session minutes. The board reviewed the executive session minutes from the December 11, 2018 meeting. The board requested an addition to the administrative function topic summary. Monica Rinker made a motion to accept the amended minutes, and Tom Wood seconded the motion. The board unanimously voted to approve the amended minutes with a yea vote from Rodney Glotfelty, Monica Rinker, Charlotte Seabold, and Tom Woods. Personnel update. Ms. Barbara Baker, Superintendent, provided the board with an update on recently hired non-certificated employees as well as staff resignations. Negotiations pursuant to 3-305B9 parameters. Ms. Allison Schweitzer, Director of Finance, discussed proposed parameters for negotiations with the GASA Group. The board considered these matters but took no action on this item. Healthcare Coalition. Mrs. Schweitzer shared information regarding the Garrett County Employee Health Coalition. She stated that the three entities, Garrett County Public Schools, Garrett College, and Garrett County, are reevaluating the structure of the benefits and employee contributions. The coalitions are recommending that a move towards diversity for each group of entities. Tom Woods made a motion to adopt a plan with diversity of the benefits and employee contribution, while the other provisions of the coalition structure would be maintained. Charlotte Seabold seconded the motion. The board unanimously voted to approve the amended minutes with a yea vote from Rodney Glotfelty, Monica Rinker, Charlotte Seabold, and Tom Woods. Bus contract. Mr. Richard Wazlowski, Director of Transportation, recommended a bus contractor for Route 40 Elementary School. The board will take action on this item during the public session. Strategic Planning RFPs update and review. The board discussed the responses to the request for proposals for strategic planning work, as well as potential negotiating strategies for such proposals. Mr. Paugh will provide the board with dates to conduct interviews with potential firms and consultants. Legal topics. Athletic trainers. Mr. Brandon Hoover, Board Attorney, provided further legal advice from the school system's attorney regarding the Maryland Board of Physicians and former athletic personnel. The board took the legal guidance into consideration and will not pursue this matter any further. Potential breach of warranty claims regarding various repairs at various schools. Mr. Hoover discussed a potential breach of contract with two contractors who work for the school system. The board requested Mr. Hoover look into the matters and send letters to the contractors regarding the breach of warranties. Administrative function. The board discussed various administrative function topics. The board considered all of the administrative function topics, but no actions were taken by the board. The board recessed the executive session to return to public session at 6:08 p.m. The board returned to executive session at 8:40 p.m. Tom Woods made a motion to adjourn the executive session, and Rodney Glotfelty seconded the motion. The board unanimously approved adjourning the executive session at 10:54 p.m. with a yea vote from Rodney Glotfelty, Charlotte Seabold, Monica Rinker, and Tom Woods. Board members present included Mr. Matthew Paugh, Board President, Tom Woods, Vice President, board members Mr. Rodney Glotfelty, Mrs. Monica Rinker, and Mrs. Charlotte Seabold, Mrs. Barbara Baker, Secretary Treasurer, Superintendent of Schools, Ms. Karen DeVore, Executive Director of Curriculum Instruction Administration, and Mr. Brandon Hoover, Board Attorney, were present for the meeting. Mrs. Allison Schweitzer, Director of Finance, was also present for part of the meeting. Mrs. Karen Brewer, Executive Assistant to the Superintendent, was present for part of the meeting for the purpose of taking minutes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Move to announcements.
Okay, announcements. February 15th, we have a 3-hour early dismissal for staff development. February 18th, we will be in session for even though it's President's Day, appropriate exercises will be held. February 21st is the MAVE Legislative Day Luncheon in Annapolis. February 22nd is the Cool Schools Dunk behind Uno's on Deep Creek Lake. February 25th, the board will meet in executive session from 4 to 5 with a special budget work session from 5 to 6:30 approximately. February 26th is a MABE Board Service Academy on the Open Meetings Act at the MABE office in Annapolis. February 28th, progress report for third grading period. And over the weekend, the Southern Garrett High School wrestling team won the state championship. I added that one. Yes, in Charles County, they won the state dual championship 2 years in a row.
That's great. Congratulations. And do note that February 25th meeting, so that's at 4 o'clock for executive session and then 5 o'clock for the public work session for the budget. All right. Mr. Gladfeldy will recognize the National School Council.
So we'll do pictures. Can I
Yeah, I
just?
think
Yeah, Dr. Lawver.
And I don't.
I need to read
with you.
I need to read the proclamation first, okay? But it's a pleasure for me to actually be able to talk about School Counseling Week and to present this proclamation. I think our counselors do a wonderful job in the school, making sure that each individual student reaches their best potential. And I know, working at the health department, we had a lot of counselors that went out and worked in the schools, and certainly those school counselors were invaluable to really talk about some of the issues these children were facing. So this is National School Proclamation Week. It's February 4th to 8th. Whereas school counselors are employed in public and private schools to help students reach their full potential, and whereas school counselors are actively committed to helping students explore their abilities, strengths, interests, and talents as these traits relate to career awareness and development. And whereas school counselors help parents focus on ways to further the educational, personal, and social growth of their children. And whereas school counselors work with teachers and other educators to help students explore their potential and set realistic goals for themselves. And whereas school counselors seek to identify and utilize community resources that can enhance and complement comprehensive school counseling programs and help students become productive members of society. And whereas comprehensive developmental school counseling programs are considered an integral part of the educational process and enables all students to achieve success in school. Therefore, we do hereby proclaim February 4th through 8th, 2019 as National School Counseling Week, and it's signed by all members of the board who are present. So thank you for the wonderful work you do in the schools.
This is pretty cool.
Christopher Adams was going to be here. He's at Southern High, but he lives in Prospect. He's a little bit worried about the roads. But Mr. Watson, who's counselor at Yard Place.
This is photo night, right?
Yes.
It is.
All right. Take 2 pictures. One. There is this year. There's a second. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I think Mr. Woods has a presentation.
At the last meeting, we had a presentation that was presented by the 2 reading coaches at Southern Middle about the Striving Readers Grant. And I get excited about athletics. It's rare that I get excited about reading. All I read is the internet
Where's that library book for last week?
Yeah, I think you get
So I went home and I said to Debbie, it was one of the most exciting presentations that I've seen in the 2 years I've been on the board. The 2 ladies that presented were excited, the kids in the video were excited, everybody was excited about it. So we decided that we would take some money from our son's scholarship fund the Andrew S. Woods Memorial Scholarship Fund, which we get money through the efforts of the WGW Community Youth Cup each year. And so we bought 200 coupon gifts, 100 for each end of the county, so that the kids could have an incentive to go to McDonald's and get some free food as those coaches felt they had progressed along the way. And so it's our privilege through that scholarship fund to help a little bit in something that seems to be really, really exciting for the kids. So we're very honored to do that.
When Mr. Woods called me about his idea, I shared it with several folks at the office and Mrs. Wazowski, who wrote the grant, and we were just so excited. And thank you so much for thinking of it, and I think it's going to be a nice addition to the program and really be a benefit, so thank you very much. Want to hold one? I'll hold it. But we got it on the first try.
I felt
All right, moving into the CIA report, we have Grantsville Elementary School presentation.
That's great, Tom.
So I'm very excited tonight. Our school being featured tonight is Grantsville Elementary, and we have with us Mrs. Tracy Miller, who is in her first year as principal at Grantsville, but I have to often remind myself that because the transition has just gone so smoothly that I forget that she's in her first year. So, as you know, for our CIA report, I work with the principals prior to getting together their information for the presentation, and Mrs. Miller said that she wanted to share the Swiss program, a couple of other things, but the Swiss program primarily. And I'm very excited for her to share that with you because, you hear so much about our PBIS programs, and just to remind you, this is Grantsville's second year in PBIS. And so what we did this year, Swiss is a data collection. Mrs. Miller will elaborate a little bit more on it. Swiss is a data collection program that mirrors, is aligned with the PBIS program. And while we do collect data in our Power School, the Swiss program really digs deep, and you're going to see just how deep it digs here and how helpful it is. So we piloted this Swiss program in just 3 schools this year, and obviously we chose the 3 schools who had existing PBIS schools prior to this year. As you know, the rest of our schools just came on board this year. So most of our schools are in their first year of fully implemented PBIS teams, and the 3 that we had previously, we piloted the Swiss program. And I have already written into the Title IV grant for next year to cover the cost of this Swiss program for all the schools for next year. So you just nudge me or tell me when you want me to click. And
Good evening. She kind of went through my presentation. So go ahead and get to them. As she said, Grantsville is in their second year of full implementation of PBIS. So we are at the point where we're able to add on to our PBIS. So we've added a parent component who attends our PBIS meetings that we have monthly. We've started to implement our Tier 2, where we have what's called a check-in and check-out. So it's a student who may need just to build a relationship with someone so that they want to come to school and be successful. They come, they check in, we ask them how their evening was, we give them encouragement for the day. As we see them, we might give them a thumbs up. Then at the end of the day, they check out, and we kind of remind them, do you have your homework? Do you have everything packed up? So it's kind of building a relationship with the students who need it to be successful. We also have monthly Bulldog Bashes. This is for the students who have maintained good behavior through the month. We have the bashes once a month, and they include small scale to large scale items such as classroom selection, the teachers get to select, or we do a full-blown school-wide. Our last one was a snow party, which then was a snow day, which then was changed, and so we did finally get it in. We did not have snow the day that we had it, but it was a success. And then the students who do not earn the bash, that's a time that we do a reteach for them to help with their behaviors. And then we've added the Swiss component, so we can go ahead and click the next one. So Swiss is a school-wide information system, and it is a database where we enter the same data that we're entering into PowerSchool, but in this database, it definitely drills down. So you can go to one more. These are all the different types of drill down reports that you can have to help make decisions. So we then kind of remove the student's name, so to speak, and really look at the behavior. Look, where is the behavior? Where is it happening in our school? What time of day is it happening? So then you can look at all this data and know where you need to put your supports for your school. So this is what the reports look like. These are Grantsville-specific reports that we've had in there. And you can see that there's no student names, but you can go month, you can go time, you can go location. And it kind of gives you then, as I said, the areas that you would need to support for as far as behaviors in your school. Again, another drill down report. And that's kind of Swiss and PBIS. The other exciting part that we're having at Grantsville that I cannot stop talking about is our Towering Garden. We're partnering with the University of Maryland, and we are told that we are the second school in the state of Maryland to partner with them to get the Towering Garden fully funded and up and running. It's been a long process. We've started since the beginning of school, and it will be finally arriving this week. And on February 25th, we will have a staff training. The company will be coming and putting our Towering Garden up, and we will be starting to grow. You can see some of the pictures of what a Towering Garden looks like. You have the garden inside, and it grows 3 times faster than it would outside. So in Garrett County, the children are going to be able to see from seed to edible, to seed to edible several times throughout the school year. It is also on a cart, so it can be moved from location to location. So it stays in one general location, but then it can be moved to the classrooms or moved outside wherever you need it. I've also been in contact with the FFA at Northern High School and trying to think of some ways that we can involve the high school students later on and show those career pathways, and also some STEM lessons that we're involving. And the last slide there is just giving some facts about the Towering Garden that they shared. You know, you don't have the mess, you don't have the dirt. It's kind of aeroponics, which is NASA, so you're bringing the science into that as well and studying all those areas. Next gen math.
Great.
Any questions, comments?
How do you go about using your Swiss data?
Me and the behavior support teacher are the only two that are entering the data right now. So we drill down the reports, and then we take them to our monthly PBIS meetings, and then our PBIS team looks at the data, and we see, do we have supports in this area? Where can we put supports? And so it's really just given us the breakdown of our school. Where's the behavior? Where do we need to add the supports to help us be more successful overall in the school?
What have you found? What have you found from that data?
Some of them were classrooms. They were long-term subs, so I needed to give more support in there. Some of it was the time of day. So we found, like, right after lunch was a time, and bus dismissal, which are typical if you're in a school system, but then you could really drill down of certain kids, and then that also led to our check-in, check-out system with those children.
Yeah, I noticed on one of them, the playground went off the chart. So did you make changes?
Yes, I've implemented several different support staff in the cafeteria for bus dismissal time and on the playground, and then also in a classroom I've shifted some adults around to give some more support.
Is that a software program?
It's a software program, yes.
Does every school have access to?
Well, as I said, we're implementing it, we're piloting it in the 3 schools that already had PBIS.
Yeah.
And then our goal is to put it in all schools next year.
So when they get PBIS, they'll get the Swiss system as well?
Next year.
And every school has PowerSchool, which is a data collection system as well. This one just drills down very clear, very specific.
And just to clarify that, the 3 schools that and actually one of the schools requested it, and so we looked into it, and that's why we obviously chose the 3 that were already had existing programs. But in this pilot year, they are entering the data in our school and in Swiss. So when there's an incident, they enter it in both systems. And we met with the people who would be involved. At Grantsville, it was Mrs. Miller and the behavior support teacher. At Northern Middle, it's Mr. Stevens and I think it's just Mr. Stevens, and then at Broadford, it is the administration there. So they agreed to it, and they're all very, very positive about it, about what they get from it.
So the data collection is based on individual students' warnings, that type thing, or what is that? What is the individual data that you're collating then into those?
There's minor and there's major incidents. So it could be a minor that the classroom teacher is gathering data for the infraction that the child has, or a major means that they came to the office. So you collect data on that student no matter what the behavior was.
Okay, then you take that and you
Yes.
put it into
And the
non-identifying.
system.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Sometimes I think removing the student's name so that there's not a label on that student, and you kind of look at the data, and that helps drive your support where you need.
Good.
Any other questions?
I like what you're saying about the check-in, check-out. Do you have any students that you do that with? Would you say like a...
Right now, we have one, and we have one other student that we're looking at putting into this system. That is new. It's just something that we've added on this year.
Well, it sounds like a positive.
It is very positive.
That's another,
For this child's
another
sake.
Swiss level. Check-in, check-out is a level.
So they know automatically to come to the teacher,
Yes.
whoever they... That becomes a routine for them every
It
day.
does. And it's almost a positive for them. They enjoy it because they know it's an adult that cares. So they come and they love having those conversations, sharing what they do in the evenings, the weekends.
That's good. Now, the Swiss that you was talking about, will that also be in the high school then, when you get the
Yes.
title?
Next
So
year it'll be in all
It'll be in
schools.
all schools.
Follow up on Monica's statement. Check-in, check-out, I'm new, I don't know what that means. Can you tell me a little?
The student would visit an adult and kind of check in, like, hi, how are you? What did you do over the weekend? What do you need to do to be successful today in school? And you kind of go over what they would need in their classroom or whatever their area of need would be. And then the checkout is, at the end of the day, did you have a good day? Did you remember to keep your hands to yourself? Do you have your homework? It's just a relationship building plus helping focus that child on what they need for the day, very specific.
And the adult can be any teacher,
Yes.
administrator.
And there's data that's collected on that
Yes.
as well.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Miller. Excellent.
All right, we will move into some policies and procedures. So Mrs. Schweitzer, I think, is going to be presenting under, the first one is EEBAA. Get all my vowels there. Vehicle Use Policy and Procedure. EEBAA.
So yes, I offered to do this for Mr. Wizlowski because he's running on very little sleep. So, and we work very closely on these changes. Really, you'll see that to the policy and the procedure, we have added rental vehicle so that we have policies and procedures that are covering the use of the rental vehicles. That was lacking, so we were adjusting it. Are there any questions? Pretty straightforward.
I have one.
Yeah.
It looks like only on the policy, you just added the word and rental. That's what's changed. But on the procedure, it looks like C is new, the GCPS rental vehicle.
You're correct.
Just so I understand it, it says a vehicle temporary rented for use for approved board-related business. Rental vehicles may be taken home when the trip itinerary supports doing so. So would that be like if they had to leave early in the morning and the rental place wasn't open, that they could get it the night before and then leave early?
Yes.
Okay.
Almost in every instance, we pick up the keys the night before, and we don't travel until 4:30 in the morning.
Right.
So,
Okay. And I also have another question on the same one, the procedure. it would be under category 2, under B assignments, and it looks like it's new number 3. When you read the whole thing, are these one? It says GCPS rental vehicles are rented in accordance with GCKA travel and incidental expense policy and procedure, and then it goes on. Okay, but then like in D, it says students may not be transported in GCPS rental vehicles. The vehicles may be used to transport items to support student travel, but no students. So are these ones that we own, that are pool vehicles? Are these ones
These are rental vehicles that must be used to transport something that the student may need. For instance, JRTC, when they go in the summer, sometimes they need to rent a van to be able to transport a large thing at different times.
Right, or the robotics?
Robotics
probably.
is another example,
Okay.
yes.
What was the rationale behind that, not allowing students to be in a rental vehicle?
The state
Yeah,
superintendent.
we discussed this.
Okay,
Yeah.
In our meeting came up because the state superintendent wanted to approve the rental vehicles.
okay, that's the rationale. State
So,
superintendent said so?
Yes.
That's what I'm going with.
Well, I guess in my thought process was, sometimes it would save the board a lot of money to rent a 12-person van to take
They
10
are not-
golfers.
They're not allowed to ride in 10-person vans. That's Comar.
Okay,
So we've taken student members to MAVE conference at Ocean City. And a rental is,
You
so that's
rebels.
over.
Yeah, I think that in the past. I
In
think
the
with
past,
Dr.
it was
Salmon,
okay.
she is
With-
no longer.
Yeah,
I think
with
it
the
has
current
changed.
state superintendent, she will not approve it. The previous state superintendent did approve it.
so now the only way you can transport students is on a school bus? No.
it's-
Well, I'm just trying to
school-owned vehicle.
understand.
A school, exactly.
One of our pool vehicles, the Durangos,
yeah.
they can go in.
Okay, so these are only ones that you would rent. It's the only way then students can be transported, I mean, else not parent by, would be school bus or the 2 pool vehicles that we own.
So if we didn't have, we just
Or
got
by
the 2
Yeah, we
pool
did.
vehicles.
Or by parent.
Right.
That was one of the reasons we got the pool.
They're what,
vehicles,
7
because-
passenger vehicles, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Is that Comar's limit? 7 passengers?
I'm not sure. It may be 8, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm
Richard know
asking.
that right offhand. But
Yeah.
I do know that a 10-person van is not allowed.
In terms of us owning the van or even renting the van?
Transport.
Well,
Students.
transporting
Transporting.
students, whether you own it or not,
Yeah,
you can't
okay.
transport
Right.
students in a 10-passenger van.
But we could put them in a school bus with no seat belts, and that'll be okay. I mean, really.
So was that a law changed?
You said state
Because I don't
superintendent,
remember,
right?
I don't remember anything.
The 10
van.
and 15 passenger vans is in Comar. That it's not, and I don't know if it was a change, it's just,
It's been that way.
yeah.
The 10 and
Since I went through
15.
that.
Right.
But,
Anything over-
but just the one kid, how has that changed? If you had one student that you transported?
In the rental vehicle. Is that what
Yeah,
you mean?
yeah.
Well, the rental vehicle is different. That's a state superintendent decision.
So that's what brought this about.
When we
then.
discussed that with Rich in the policy committee, he said that they couldn't guarantee the maintenance on the rental vehicles and that type of thing was her
Our
rationale.
insurance company doesn't like it either. So
Right.
with the state superintendent saying no, that's the rationale. So,
So-
yes, all the language that is added in red is in reference to rental vehicles.
Okay. So then, again, the only way that our students can be transported, say if you took, I don't know, a small group, maybe, say robotics or something, you would have to take a school bus or a vehicle, one of our 2 pool vehicles, correct? By the state superintendent's,
Or parents.
or parent. Yes, okay. All right. Because I knew that was new and I needed to clarify what it meant.
And again, this is just a first read.
Correct.
So
But if
it'll be
it's a
out for
law,
30 days.
it's a law. We can't,
The rental part's not the law.
No.
well,
Kind
state
of
superintendent.
isn't it?
At this time.
The person saying yes is the law.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
So but that is open to change as the administration changes, I guess.
Things change every time.
Okay. So that's the first read on that. If you have any questions in the meantime, you can send those to Rich or Mrs. Baker.
Okay.
All right. The next one is the DKCA, which is the Travel and Incidental Expenses Policy and Procedure.
So for this policy, we have updated the template. So we've added the purpose, the scope, policy statement, so that it aligns with the other format of the policies. We've also added in the scope a section, a cross-reference to COMAR that references that the superintendent and superintendent's assistants are entitled to reimbursement for travel and incidental expenses. That's really the only changes for the policy. For the procedure, however, this has undergone extensive transformation, I guess you could say. The goal was to add detail so that we could curb some of the confusion that a lot of our employees have when they're going through the reimbursement process. So there's an awful lot of red, but most of it is not new. It's not a new practice. It's not a new procedure that we're following. It's just that it's actually in the procedure here. We did add the responsibilities for the traveler, the supervisor, the finance department, so that everyone understands their role when it comes to this. There is a high level of fraud that follows employee reimbursement, so it's very important that we do outline all of these details here. We also explained which forms should be used in which instance, because that is also something that at times is confusing for people. Then we get into the travel and incidental expenses. We explained when to use each vehicle. Then the reimbursement process, that was not outlined very effectively, I don't believe, so we've tried to do that here. The main changes that are within this procedure is that we are recommending that the due date after the event causing the reimbursement should go to 30 days rather than 45 days. We're also recommending that there would be an accompanying schedule of payment. So if your completely approved package arrives in finance by a certain day, you will know that you will receive payment by the corresponding day. It will be very similar to our payroll calendar that we have. And then the third change is that we are recommending that we move to an electronic funds transfer model, in which paper checks will not be cut. Employees will receive their reimbursement automatically into their account. It does not need to be the same account as their payroll, but it does need to be a constant. It can't change with every reimbursement, but it can be different than the payroll. And we're recommending that these changes take effect 7/1/19, so that we would have a rollout period so that employees would understand that the expectations have changed, what their roles are, and then also to get an EFT form on file with the finance department.
Questions?
I have a couple. On both of them, policies and procedures, under, well, right now on procedure, under purpose, it says the superintendents and professional assistants. Who are we referring to as professional assistants? Like, that's not a term I'm familiar with.
It is a term that is in COMAR, and it's every single staff member of Garrett County Public Schools. So we were referencing COMAR.
Okay.
And Mr. Paul this was something that we debated in committee, what that means, what it, so.
But it's referenced throughout COMAR.
I thought that we,
In the committee meeting I went to, we were going to put Garrett County School employees because of the fact that, Matthew, do you remember?
It says that in B under all Garrett County School employees.
And I think
We could define that, I would think, if that would help.
Right.
Is that in the,
Professional
it is actually
assistants,
written
it is right
just
there.
as
It is there.
GCPS employee.
because that was your recommendation, so we
Yeah.
added that.
Okay.
Yes, we did include that.
Where is that?
The third sentence in the purpose.
Is that the procedure or policy?
I'm looking at the
Policy, it's
procedure
under
right now,
scope.
but is it under both?
Yeah, under scope.
It's under both.
Reimbursed only GCPS employee.
Yeah, that does clarify it.
Under travel responsibilities, it's pretty self-explanatory, but we have on there, if mileage is for daily GCPS duties, a monthly form must be submitted within 30 days from last day of the month. Do we have a lot that their duty requires them to travel, for mileage claims?
Yes, we have several people. We also have people that may not travel every single day consistently to the same place, but what they do is for all of their travel for the whole month, they submit it at one time.
So their travel would be to school they're supposed to be at that day then, if they're a traveling art teacher, music teacher, or do they have like a base
No.
school they go from?
Wherever their duty day begins,
Uh-huh.
if they have to leave that school, then they are paid mileage to go to the other school.
Okay.
If they split their day in the middle of a duty day. If they are spending their entire day in school, that may not, they may spend 4 days at one school and 1 day at another, they do not receive mileage for the 1 day that they go to the other school, because that's their duty
Right, okay.
school for that day. So it's only if you travel during the duty day.
All right.
There are not that many people who do that anymore that are teachers. It's mostly support staff.
Okay.
Speech therapists, there's a wide range of special education people who do that, administrators. There are a limited number of counselors that move during the day, and that could change based
Right.
upon the student need.
Okay.
But we ask that they turn them in by month, because we keep a record of that.
Uh-huh. Okay. I thought there was one more question. Under D, travel and incidental expenses, it says GCPS owned vehicles, which is our pool vehicles, correct?
Well, any
Any.
GCPO.
Okay, I guess it would be like if you're maintenance or those two. This is about to get the fuel. Who keeps track of our fuel usage? It says like the fuel for these vehicles must be obtained from Garrett County Roads Department. Is there like something they write on there to sign in, or?
No, there's a different key. And every time they use the key, it records it, and the county sends us an invoice, and it's detailed which keys used which.
Okay, and then you just reimburse the county for the fuel. Okay, this is my last question. Under lodging, which is still under D, travel and incidental expenses. Travelers may secure their own lodging. Lodging rate may not exceed the operating budget approved rate unless approved by the Director of Finance. So like, where would they know what the operating budget approved rate is for lodging?
Right. The rate had been $120. When Mr. McKenzie was still here, there was a point at which that information was no longer in the budget book. So on the incidental rate sheet that's in the budget book, these amounts will be in there. You'll see lodging, you'll see meals, and there was lodging, meals.
Air travel?
No, air
No.
travel isn't one of them.
Meals, lodging, air travel?
I don't remember what the other one was. But you'll see whenever we go, not tonight, but
Right.
when we start showing you the budget documents, we have completely overhauled that page. so that it's more usable. And that, these rates will go in there.
Should we have that in writing? So, I mean, I know that it can change, but should we have it somewhere that if somebody doesn't know, like they know to look at the budget book for it, or
When they're requesting, I would hope their supervisor would say,
to tell them what the amount
this is what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Probably
It'll-
reimbursable
It's gonna be
mileage rate.
Yes, it'll
We're
be
talking about being
very
on the
similar
form.
to the reimbursable mileage rate. I send a memo to all employees when it
Okay.
changes. This is now the reimbursable rate, use this form, not this form, it starts this date, and so it'll be the same thing. That's one of the reasons why we don't want to put this procedure into effect until 7/1, because the rates for lodging and meals will change
right?
With the new
effective
budget.
7/1.
Yeah,
But
the new
if you
budget.
travel at the end of June, it'll be on the 2019 rates.
Okay.
Well, the easy solution to that is to actually print that page out of the book and email it to everybody. At each office. And then, even if it changes the next year, it's an easy thing. You don't have to distribute it, right?
What is classified as incidentals?
Parking tolls, conference registration fees,
Meals.
school meals,
Meals is
Well,
separate on there.
incidentals, parking tolls, the extra stuff involved with traveling.
Katie had a question.
So, in response to Ms. Rinker's idea, could we possibly, see the budget book for this information? Just reference it in the procedure so it would be in writing where to go.
Not everyone has access to the budget book.
Okay.
And right now, we don't have a way to link to just that page. So what I would recommend is that we post the sheet on the finance website and have a link to the sheet on the finance website. I think that would be clean.
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay, thank you.
Well, there
I
has
think
to
we
be-
talked about actually putting the link at the bottom
Yeah, and
of this.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And now when you have on the bottom of this attachment, finance forms page, I clicked on it, and you have 11 different categories. I seen. So maybe would you put under one of those categories under your finance forms? Is that where you could put the,
Yeah,
just the?
that's where we go.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
All right.
So we had those two, and that's a first read on that. That'll come back next month. So if you have any further feedback or questions, please share that.
Too easy.
We are moving to DFA, the investments from operating fund policy.
So these are back again this month for action. So the first one, investments from operating funds. The only real change is that we are excluding the OPEB trust funds from this policy. Due to the nature of the long-term investment, nature of the OPEB trust funds, they shouldn't fall under the regular operating funds. Mr. Hoover would like to also change under B policy statement. In red, we have such funds will be invested in accordance with the strike annotated code of Maryland, and then pick up with section 6-202 and 6-2222 of the state finance and procurement article of the annotated code of Maryland.
That's correct.
So that is a change that we recently received. Are there any other questions concerning the policy for this?
And that was where at on the policy?
Policy statement, B.
The last sentence.
Last sentence of
He
B.
said strike annotated
In
code
red.
of Maryland, and then add that wording at the end.
Okay.
Questions on this policy? Is there a motion to approve the policy DFA?
So,
So moved.
go ahead. Go ahead.
So moved.
Motion by Monica,
Second.
second by Tom.
Any other discussion or questions? All those in favor of approving policy DFA, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Policy is approved. And now DFAA, the OPEB investment policy.
Yes, now this is a brand new policy in order to cover the OPEB trust funds. Much of the language comes from the original policy investment statement that the trust had when it was held jointly with the county and the college. So we've altered it so that it is just for Garrett County Public Schools. But there's really not a whole lot that has been changed. Now, Mr. Hoover has reviewed this, and then as well as First United Trust Department, they have reviewed it as well.
First United administers of them.
Yes, they do.
Just as a updating on the, Mr. Hoover pointed out the, under the health plan trust, retiree health plan trust policy statement, the letterhead, we need to adjust the names there with vice president.
And the addition of Mr. Gladfelding.
Yeah.
Then you could make it just this,
Yeah, I think we just should remove the
Okay,
letterhead.
that's good.
because it'll change.
It has the old one on it.
It may change.
Yep.
Believe it will
Never
change.
know.
At some point.
It will. It will change. All right. So we have the policy. Any questions on that policy?
We had our answers last month.
Is there a motion to approve policy DFAA?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Woods. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Gladfelding. Then moved and seconded to approve policy DFAA. Any other discussion or questions?
No.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That policy is approved, so DFAA is now policy. And I just want it to be seen that it's before 7 o'clock. It's 6:57.
I was going to say same thing, 4 minutes ahead.
But if it was 20 after, you would be saying
I think
that.
Dr. Wilson just checked, and I don't.
And we don't have public comment, so we're
public
going to
comment.
move right along, and you can stay up there for the quarterly finance report.
And this is really just for the board's information. There's not a lot to share because there's not a lot of variance. So, does anyone have any questions?
Thank you for putting the percentage back on the side.
You're welcome.
Looks like our meals are down some, the lunch
We're
count.
also 3 less days into school. So that does
Make a little bit
make a
different.
difference. But as you can see, our breakfast per day is up.
Yeah.
However, our lunch is down. Need nachos grande day more often.
Yeah.
I had asked at earlier meetings about getting a more in-depth monthly report. Where are we at on that?
Well, Mrs. Schweitzer and I have talked about it. It would have to be something that would be created in Tyler. So Mr. Paul and I talked about finding out if we could do it in the for information items, but I wanted to find out if the full board would like to have that on a monthly basis as well, because it would be additional work for the finance department to create.
You think of like the old printouts that has everything detailed down?
Several counties, every month, they get where they're at. I mean,
I think
know,
you gave
where...
a sample of it.
Yes, I had a sample, and I passed it on of where each one of, so you can see what's being spent and where you're at, you know, how we get to the end of the year and find out that we had money in the budget, that when we were, you know, needed money for other things or whatever, and we could have had it transferred. So the fact that we have the Tyler, I would think that those type of reports can be pulled up. And then we would know more about the all we get is some, things that were picked out here, different ones. This way you get a form, like many boards do, showing where you're at each month with all of your different headings that we have in our budget book or whatever.
That's
So
good,
then
but it can be confusing too, I think, because there may be expenditures that only occur once every quarter or something like
Right,
that.
right, and it shows what's being held
Yeah,
and all of that, the one
Well,
that Carol
if
Cannon
you
had encumbered,
If you
yes.
encumber the funds, our practice is such that we are just starting to truly encumber a lot of our funds because the SIM system didn't do it.
Right.
So we're training all of these supervisors who have the ability to spend dollars are learning how to do this. So you're still, unfortunately, not going to see a true picture. Again, what Mrs. Baker said is true. We would have to build that exact report that you're requesting. Unfortunately, it can't just hit a button and it happens that way, but we can build that if the board would like it. But it will take some time. Because as with everything with Tyler,
Right.
you can build anything, but you still have to build the report.
Tell it what to do. It doesn't naturally
Right.
just do it. No.
Well, I just think that if other boards of education have that knowledge every month and know where they're at financially, I don't understand why we don't have it. When we've invested in the new equipment to be at, the Tyler equipment and the opportunities there. I mean, we wouldn't be surprised that we have $1 million or something, at the end, if you go through this and they get it to the point where they are putting what's encumbered and all, you can tell exactly what you have and what's being held for other expenditures.
I guess my question is, what would you do with the information if you had it every month, and what would we?
Well, we'd be smarter as far as what our money looks like, as far as we move along, and we make decisions for the budget on whether we know, we don't really know at that point if where we're at in the different categories. So it's sort of, it seems to me that we're going blind into something that we have information here, but we don't have access to it.
Well, yeah.
So is there a difference between what you're asking for and then the expenditure to date? You can kind of see where we're at so far.
Right, but yes, just on those chosen things. This would be on all of the things.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
Mr. McKenzie created this for the board.
Mhm.
And the reason he chose the line items that he did is because these are the items that prove to vary the most. That we really do have to watch, that aren't planned purchases every single year. So that was the intent of it. So, just-
Right, I know that. I'm just asking to make it, you can still do this if you want to do this, but I'm still asking for more in-depth information, like other boards are getting, to make decisions on, budget decisions for the next year and all.
Well, and I think that's probably the key word is let them work through Tyler this year, and as a goal to be able to have some more information in the next budget cycle. That gives you plenty of time to, everybody learn the system. You learn from us what kinds of line items we're really interested in seeing, if not all of them, but which ones are we? And I think it's a good goal for the next budget cycle to look at that.
I'm agreeing with Ms. Siebold. I think that's a good idea too. With all your years' experience on the board and with you looking at other boards, and you understand the value of it and if it would be an asset, especially at budget time.
And as a principal, I did look at that a lot. I mean, I printed that out of Sims almost every couple of weeks to kind of see where we were,
Each school.
where we were with what we're spending in the school and what we've encumbered in the school already. It was very good information to have. But I do think to say we want it next month wouldn't be something we should do. I think we should let you work through the system for a while with the people that you need to work with. But I do think it's something we need to discuss when we get to, May or June. What do we want? What kinds of information would we like to have?
Well, I just want to make sure that we are actually still looking at it, and that, how other people feel about it, whether it's important or not.
Are we comfortable, though, with the consensus of having it,
Have discussion.
give the time to the finance department to,
So after the budget,
yeah.
after you approve budget and everything, we'll look at that for next fiscal year.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Would it be okay to have the goal be for November?
Yeah, I think we'll just have the discussion, maybe.
Yeah.
I think Mr. Wood said before the next budget cycle,
Yeah.
so that we have it before we start the next.
Yeah, I don't have, that wouldn't be when you have to report. That will be when we discuss it to kind of see what we need, where we're at with it.
Thank you.
All right, the next item is the strategic planning update, and our update there is that the board is meeting, has had interviews with some consultants and firms, and we still have to make a decision as to how we're moving forward. So when we go back into executive, we're going to talk about that negotiating strategy and what we're wanting to do there. So that's where it is. So we have had some conversations, and we reviewed the proposals that were received and discussed them. Any comments from the board on that? Anything else you want to add?
Yep. Being worked on.
All right. New business. Last day of school for seniors.
And as Mrs. Schweitzer presented for Mr. Wazlowski, I'm also asking this on the actual memo came from Mr. Edwards. He is asking that the board officially approve May 29th as the last day for seniors. This will give them time to practice graduation, complete all final exams, make up any additional work before graduation on June 1st. So all testing and AP exams, everything will be concluded by May 29th. So we're officially asking as May 29th be the last day for seniors.
Okay.
Is that a Saturday?
May 29th?
Wednesday.
Wednesday? Oh, last day for seniors, okay.
May 29th. And then that's right before graduation. Yeah.
So
Always worried about graduation.
that's when it was really.
Yeah.
So the recommendation is for May 29th to be the last due day. Is there a motion to approve that recommendation?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Woods. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Sebald. Okay, so moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that date? Questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Then May 29th is the final day for seniors.
Okay, thank you.
The revenue projections and
Want to
budget
take a break,
priorities?
or are we going to just go ahead?
I'm
We have to set
okay.
it up, so
Okay.
we can move right into it.
Go ahead.
Remember to review this year with it. So you need to add in the other day. Yeah, here's mine. Okay. And then add this on. Right away, and I got today. Okay. Yeah.
Mr. Paul, you ready?
Yep.
You ready?
All right.
All right, so Mrs. Schweitzer and I are here this evening to present to you our revenue projections and our budget priorities. We're going to talk a little bit about the budget cycle, how we're coming to recommendations as two different cabinet team and a lead instructional team. And we do have some what I think is some good news this evening as we share the revenue projections. We talked quite a bit as we were working through some of our internal strategic planning. This has not changed my goal for the school system, and I continue to believe that this is the goal for all students is to provide, and all of our employees, to provide a well-rounded, high-quality educational opportunity for every student in Garrett County Public Schools. And last year I talked a little bit about every student means all. Regardless of where you live or where you go to school, that we will provide that high-quality educational opportunity for every student in our school system. So tonight, we have our 2020 preliminary revenue projection. Some external considerations we always have every single year that I think it's important that the public and the board are aware that some things we have to consider as we work through a budget season that are kind of beyond our control. How we came to this process, our initiatives for the fiscal year 2020, our goals and our priorities, and our next steps in developing the budget in collaboration with the school board members. So then it comes to the numbers, so I'll turn it over to Mrs. Schweitzer.
So the first chart that you see here on this slide are the major state aid program preliminary revenue numbers. We have a very favorable increase this year, so I'm really excited to be able to share that because this is the first year that I've been able to say that. So,
Me too.
yes. So we received the numbers from the state on January 18th. There was a 2.54% inflationary adjustment to the target per pupil foundation figure, which was obviously favorable. That was one of the reasons for the increase. Another reason for the increase is the fact that we are 12.25 students above the prior year. Now remember that that includes only kindergarten through 12th grade. It does not include the pre-K. When you go down the different categories of state aid programs, you'll see the bottom one is supplemental pre-K. The supplemental pre-K this year is 100% 100% of the amount that we will ever receive under that formula is being calculated, as well as we are 27 students above the prior year for pre-K. So that is one of the reasons for that significant increase. Another piece that's notable is transportation. That category received a 7.03% inflationary index, which is very favorable for us. We obviously travel a lot of miles, and so the wear and tear on our vehicles, as we're paying our bus contractors, we're constantly advocating for this line. Are there any questions about our state aid preliminary numbers?
Why did special education go down?
We did decrease 18 students in special
That's why,
education.
okay.
Yes. So.
Now, on pre-K, it's not mandatory, but required we offer it. So not all students are actually attending pre-K, correct?
Correct.
That's not
Go under
the law right now. That's
Right,
not
it's-
mandatory for all to
it's
attend.
still optional.
Yes.
But we have been able to say that any family, any student that wishes to go to pre-K, that we have been able to find a slot for them.
Even though it might be not at their home
It
school,
might not
a
be at
different
their-
school,
right, it might
depending
not be at their home
on space
school.
available.
We try and find a placement that is as close as possible. But we have been able to offer it to all. Not everybody, and I'm sure not everybody takes advantage, but we are able to offer it to all.
How solid are the preliminary numbers?
They're pretty much.
Okay.
The
There's
numbers we're gonna have.
there's no
I did
area there
not-
that could
right, I
spring a
have I
surprise.
have a week to go back to the state and say, I really have 371 special ed students. You only counted, because it's a graduated process. Before Christmas, usually the Friday right before Christmas, you get your enrollment numbers that give the numbers for all these categories, and you have a week to get back to them on whether or not you verify those numbers. And then they send these numbers, and you have a week to get back to them. I was,
So we're not disputing any of the numbers?
No, we are not disputing any of the numbers. When my estimates, the one that was really off was transportation, because the inflationary index was so much higher than what I had calculated. So all of the numbers were higher, correct? Than what I had been briefing Mrs. Baker on our estimates. So we were very pleased, and we are not disputing any of the numbers. So.
Katie?
Will you explain the declining enrollment a little bit? Why is there not?
Well, because last year in FY19, we did receive declining enrollment funding. Because the way that the formula is written, it's over a 3-year average. So even though for FY19, we increased, I think, 10 students, over the 3-year average, our decrease was still enough to receive the funding.
So this is positive, though, overall, even though we're not getting any funding for it, it's positive that we're not declining.
It's nice.
Because the overall variance is higher than the 41.
Because we're getting 12 and a half students.
Yeah.
Mrs. Rinker?
Just to understand more, the transportation inflation index, that is for the school buses, correct? That's where it's coming from, for the contractors?
It's for our transportation expenses.
And what's the inflation index mean? Like the wear and tear on the buses, or I'm not sure?
It's an inflationary index is basically to account for the cost of living increase.
Oh, okay. Okay, I understand.
So like the consumer price index for December was a 2.2% increase. Social Security has increased their benefits by 2.8% over the year. So,
Okay.
so that's where you get that inflationary factor for all goods and services increasing.
Right, it's just
cost.
something, the amount the state set, basically. We have no,
Well, they don't just, well, for transportation, they just.
yeah,
set it.
that's what I mean.
But for the basic state aid, it's written in Comar, the index that they have to follow.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Good news.
Any other questions on this slide?
Okay, so the next table is giving you the estimates for the other funding from the state and federal level. The first one is the state designated facility funding. That is normally Project Open Space, the aging schools, and the Qualified Zone Academy Bond, which is QZAB. We do have an allocation for aging schools. The project has not been assigned yet because the process is different through public school construction. They give you the allocation and then you go back and you tell them what you want to do. Then for QZAB, while that program has gone away, we still do have funds allocated for 2 more projects that we are planning to complete in FY 2020. And that's the Southern High School front facade and security vestibule, as well as the Northern High sanitary line. So those 2 projects under QZAB will be completed in FY 2020.
What was the money the governor put in for Southern High School when he put in his preliminary budget that I read in the newspaper? It was like $225,000 or something. It was assigned to Southern High School.
$241,450.
Yeah.
That was in the paper.
Yeah, what was that? What is that about?
We'll have to find that answer for you.
Oh, that's capital.
The matching, they're
For the
matching state
but
funds.
not for this project. It was for the entire front. I'm sorry, I'm not thinking about capital right now. I haven't looked at that for like 2 weeks. So the capital, that is to redo all of the pointing on the bricks and to like really, I don't know how else to say, redo the entire front of Southern High School. And then where the front of the building hits the vestibule leading into the gym to get that all cleaned up so that the drainage is better. That's what that project is. That's a capital project.
So is that subject to the local match?
Yes.
So the county has to come up
But that was unsolicited by us, correct? we didn't solicit that as a Board of Education. That was something the governor.
No, that was on, I believe, our capital improvement
Yeah,
project.
it was, no, it was nothing.
And it's been approved locally.
It was
right?
requested, and I believe already.
We had other things on there, I believe. Some was denied and some was agreed on.
Right. All right, yeah, it got startled me when I saw it. I couldn't put it together why it was coming that direction. I mean, I understand why.
I don't remember them usually put it on the front page of Cumberland paper and stuff.
Yeah.
Before. Maybe that's what you're.
For our work session on the 25th, we'll get more information, some detailed information on that.
Well, and we'll have the capital budget to line up with the operating budget so that you can, all the projects fall into one of those. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I guess it startled me to see it by itself, standing alone. But the governor was saying, let's do this. And we have a lot of capital projects we'd like to see done.
Right,
Yeah,
well,
that
that was the one that the commissioners agreed to fund.
Yeah, correct.
So it's going through, that whole CIP process with the state, it starts in October. So, like, it takes a long time for them to get to that point where.
Yeah, you got to get the Board of Public Works to
Right,
approve all that.
exactly.
Okay, you said QZADs are going to go away. Did you say that?
Yes, there will
So-
be no new monies.
So we're gonna lose that ongoing money each year that we've had as part of our operating budget.
Yes, to get projects done,
Right.
yes.
But then that new facility study, they're looking at something, because we talked about that earlier, there is something that's being looked at downstate as far as facilities. So hopefully there'll be some money that way, hopefully.
I believe that is they have asked every district to remeasure and resubmit all of their square footage that's used for instructional purposes. And so we've done that, and that report, I believe, that's what, that is what they were talking about. The rated capacities.
I don't know. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so that's the facility funding and the operating budget. Then we move on to other state and federal funding. The non-public placement amount is decreasing. Ms. Raybold and I worked together closely to try to, go back. Yes, not quite. To get a more realistic estimate on this. This is an amount that, for all intents and purposes, is a placeholder each year because it is completely dependent upon the needs of our students at Garrett County Public Schools. So we have been fortunate enough that in the last 2 to 3 years, we've had a student age out of a non-public placement, as well as it has not been necessary to send additional students to non-public placement. However, you've got to keep a certain amount there, but this is the amount that the state reimburses us for. So the nice thing about both of these decreases is that they have corresponding expense decreases, so they really don't decrease it doesn't have a net decrease in your budget, if you will. So as the revenue decreases, the expense also decreases. Then JRTC federal funds, we have that staying, the estimate is staying the same. And then this other state funds, these are the funds that are as a result of transfers from other LEAs or other school systems, because we have, Garrett County Public Schools is educating a student from Anne Arundel County or Cecil County. And then at the end of each fiscal year, we true up and they pay us. And so that's where that amount is allocated. Again, that is just an estimate. Some years it's over that, some years it's below that. But again, at the end of the fiscal year, these are areas that have budget adjustments prior to closing the fiscal year. Are there any questions about that?
So that state fund said to be a transfer from another school. Someone transferred here. So then I expect they transfer their own students here? We don't have to worry about transportation if they're going here?
They're normally like a foster student who's living in Garrett County.
Oh, okay. But their home school, home base or location, physical address is somewhere else. Okay. So then they would be just riding the school bus with the other student. Okay. Right. Right. Okay. I understand that now.
Do we still lose money to Allegheny County for northern end students?
There are 4 students that are still across county lines, and there will be 4 students next year.
So we have to pay Allegheny.
Okay. But it's based off of the maintenance of effort amount, and Allegheny County's maintenance of effort is much lower than our maintenance of effort. So it's still a loss, but it's not as bad as last year. Allegheny County had to pay us more than we had to pay them because we had more students than this cross county lines deal. So yeah, we made money on the transfers last year, but. So,
That's good. That's a first in the last 25 years.
So anyway,
We're educating
We're
our students.
almost, it's almost aged out.
Yeah, good.
they're coming to Garrett County, yes. So we have 4. So, okay, so now we're on local funding. The largest piece of this funding is the county's maintenance of effort amount. It is increasing this year, both because of the slight increase in enrollment, but also because of the mandatory increase by 0.7% due to the requirement that on a rolling average of 5 years, as compared to other counties, the per pupil spending must be increasing. So basically, any county that is increasing at a higher rate has to pull up those other counties. So this amount is based off of kindergarten through 12th grade. We do not receive any funding from the county for pre-K currently. Then when you look at the local other revenues, that's made up on a host of miscellaneous, from interest, building use fees that people pay, also our agreements with Head Start. And then the largest portion of that increase is due to a new program that we're going to have beginning with Special Olympics Maryland. Ms. Raybold and Mr. Edwards met with the management team of Special Olympics Maryland, and they will be funding our entire program for our special needs students.
So I guess then there's more records and stuff you need to submit to them then to keep them to once you get this for them to fund it. No, or
Yes, the finance team will be
All the finance.
invoicing Special Olympics Maryland once a month.
For unified sports.
Right.
Not for our special ed program.
Right.
Unified sports.
okay, thanks.
Super.
Then the final piece is $600,000 that we're proposing be used, pulled from the fund balance to be utilized in the operating budget for items that are of a one-time nature.
When you're pulling it from their fund balance, that would be like money we've set aside from subsequent years for the budget.
Exactly, yes.
So what do we have left if this amount is taken out of there?
2.7 million is what will be remaining in total and restricted for subsequent years' budget.
But don't you put money into that every year too?
Yes.
So
Yes, for FY18 carryover, we put $811,000.
now you're taking out 600?
Yes.
Okay,
So it's still a net increase to the fund balance
right,
at this point.
that's good.
Are there any other questions about local funding? So this table just displays the summary of all of the totals by source. but it gives you the preliminary revenue total number of $50,489,301, and that is an increase of 2.7%. So the really positive piece of that is that that is in line with all of the inflationary indexes, with what the IRS rates have increased for beneficiaries, for Social Security, for CPI. So finally, we have a little bit of wiggle room, if you will.
So the question is, so you're looking at the projected operating budget. Are you including the negotiated healthcare costs and salaries into that?
Yes, and we will, when we return to executive session, we
Okay.
will.
Okay, I'm just.
And you'll see that in the priorities and
Yes.
some other slides. We'll talk about that a little bit.
That's excellent.
But it is inclusive.
Yes. And again, the only numbers we're talking about tonight are the revenue numbers.
Right.
We're not talking about any of the proposed expenditure numbers.
Any other questions on this slide?
Yes.
Okay, so at the beginning, we talked a little bit about some things that are external considerations as we build the budget based on the revenue projections that we just heard. One, of course, is that the Kerwin Commission will continue its work in 2019. Those of you that have been following this for a while, this has been ongoing for many, many years. We still don't know if any of the funding formulas will change. We don't know. I know there's a lot of things in there about pre-kindergarten, but we kind of have that in the back of our mind, but it really is not an impact of this year's budget as much as some other things will be. Next one, of course, is the uncertainty of the state school construction funds. They are working on some things at the state level that could impact our capital projects.
That's what I was talking about. Okay, thank you.
And we continue to work on the third bullet on the ESSA requirements. The Every Student Succeeds Act. We are having to revise our language for gifted and talented as per COMAR, and we've got some ideas as we build the budget about how to do that. And on the next one, where you see the federal programs, our federal programs such as Title I, Title II, Title IV, our Perkins Grant, which funds our CTE programs, there are going to be greater restrictions on what are allowable expenses for that. We always talk at these meetings. We know we continue to have substance exposed newborns and the behavior challenges that those children bring 3 or 4 years after they're born. We just have there the 2019 legislative session. It's still relatively early in the legislative session. We know there are some things that could really impact us should they pass. You've probably read the minimum wage discussion of raising that to $15 an hour. That is one that could possibly, if that passes, that would definitely impact any budget discussions we have, particularly for our educational support personnel. So that's one that at this time of the year we kind of are just watching. I know you all get the MAID updates on the legislative priorities, so we're just kind of watching that one for now. Mrs. Schweitzer talked at length about inflation and the fact that goods and services are costing more. And then, of course, we always have to have our external consideration of our enrollment. And we are very happy that we have been up a little bit. But if you look at, I'll switch it online and you're right there. If you look at the Maryland Department of Planning, you'll see the trend line there, and you'll see their projections for the next coming years will continue to go down, up a little maybe, down again, up a little, but overall continuing to decline. Maybe not, hopefully, at the rapid rate that we had been seeing our enrollment go down, but this, of course, has to be a consideration every year And we also don't just look system-wide, we look elementary, middle, high school. You know, how many students will be graduating versus how many are coming into ninth grade, how many are leaving elementary school, coming into our middle schools. So this enrollment analysis is always a consideration as we prepare our budget. And Dr. Lauber, we have you here, so I'm going to just call on you. These Maryland Department of Planning numbers, they're usually fairly accurate, correct?
It's very comprehensive and a variety of factors that they look at in that area, like any economic development, health statistics,
Birth rates.
Birth rates.
a little bit, yeah.
How did it compare to our actual numbers this year?
Yeah, where were they at last
I
year?
don't remember exactly the variance, but it was close. I think it was within 10. So, I mean, it's a lot. It's hard because we're so small now that 5 or 10 students.
It's a lot of money for us.
And really make an impact.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Exactly. And there have been years when you go back over the data. When I first came to the Board of Ed, I was a staff accountant. I worked very closely with Dr. Lauber at looking at the historical, lining up the what the Maryland Department of Planning had projected and what actually happened. And there were an awful lot of times where they might get it right the year ahead or the year after, but the trend line always stayed the same. Last year they got our increase off by a year. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there, and sometimes it's which school year these students end up enrolling in. But just as Dr. Lauber said, the Maryland Department of Planning, this is just one facet of the information that they're giving it to us, but they've boiled it down from all sorts of demographics.
I was just interested if that's a trend line that we certainly don't like. I was hoping you was going to say, well, they've been off a lot.
They're usually pretty close, and we can certainly, like I said, we're going to provide other information on the 25th. We can certainly go back and kind of compare and see how close the projections were to what our actuals were.
Well, it sounds like it's pretty close.
It's usually
if
pretty
you
close.
go 5 years back, beyond that, it's horrible. So we are our trend line is much flatter than it's been in the last
You can go back and see what all
15
happened
years.
those 5 years before to our county economy, too. And tell you why those things happen.
That almost looks like the birth rate curve. Very similar.
It's very similar, yeah. Well, it mirrors the birth rate curve as well as the population of 25 to 34 years old. Whenever you look at the demographic information, I mean, it makes sense. So, like,
I thought, got to keep those young people in Garrett County.
Yeah, exactly. Ms. Rinker?
Yeah, before we go further, I do have one more question. When we talk about the 2019 legislative session, you said one that we're watching, of course, if minimum wage went to $15 an hour. If you had to pick one more thing, would it be one more thing that you would say you're watching close that might impact our budget?
the burden of proof for special education.
And you've probably heard that one before. We've talked at the legislative
Yeah.
breakfast about that. That's one that continues to come back. That one would, and all districts have weighed in that if that were to pass, that would have a significant impact on our.
The other one that I'm watching is House Bill, let me see what it is. It's 534. It's covering what the school construction eligible funds could include. And what they're doing is they're trying to make some of these disallowed county-only expenses be under certain circumstances covered by the state, which would include architecture and engineering. It would
Well, that's a good
include land
thing.
acquisition. It's a very good
Yeah.
thing. And that's why that is why school construction in and of itself is so uncertain right now. Because we have a new director he's relatively new, he's 18 months in, and he had some very different philosophies on aging facilities, whether you renovate or whether you build new. And so it'll be interesting in this legislative session to see what sticks and what doesn't, as well as what details we get off of the security grants that were put in at the 11th hour in last legislative session. You know, there's a lot of details that we need on how to truly spend those money, those funds. And so we're hoping for clarification on a lot of that information.
So on the bills that you're watching closely that could impact our budget, are you commenting on them as a school system, or is that something that we should comment on as a board? A letter to the committees and
Both.
I think we really need to get proactive on this.
Some, the Superintendent's Association of Maryland, we will submit, sometimes as.
So your superintendent's organization?
Right, there is, and, but something like that, when that one's ready to be heard, that would really benefit us, or one that could, like the burden of proof, that could be very difficult for us, we certainly would welcome testimony or written testimony or phone calls to your representatives.
I would think we would, you know, if you compose a letter and lay out the, you know, what the issues are with that particular bill. I don't know how we could get that down there pretty expeditiously, but I think that's really important that we do that.
No, we could get it down there. We could get it there.
Well, I mean, as far as approving a letter.
They don't really think about our small systems here, so, you know, it would benefit us to do that.
Well, and we also I prepare a lot of fiscal notes.
Oh, yeah,
So there are a lot of times that the Department of Legislative Services will send out, and they need it in less than 12 hours.
Sure, I know.
And so you're modeling something, and you've got to get it back to them. I've already done 6 this year, so.
Yeah, it's a wonderful time of year.
Right.
But we also get communications from the county government as well. Carol will send us what is the financial impact of these 3 bills that they're.
And then you got Mako lobbying for it.
Right, Mako is right, has it on there for
This has been also made, these positions,
Right.
from the LSA that we're part of, they take position on the bill stuff.
I was just wondering if individual boards actually write letters of support or opposition, that type, or concern, letters of concern.
Well, yes, it could still be opposition.
It could be opposition.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we've done it at times.
Yes, we have. Okay, any other questions about the? So I think it's important, I said earlier, to talk a little bit about the process and how the teams collaborate with each other as we develop our recommendations to the board. And the first is early in November and December. We hold individual meetings with the school principal, myself, Mrs. Schweitzer, the appropriate instructional director, whether that be Mrs. Proudfoot or Mr. Edwards. Sometimes also Mrs. Raybould, depending on the special education needs of that particular school. Then we also do the same thing with the admin side of the house, with maintenance, transportation, food service, human resources, again, special education, pupil services, IT. And then as a cabinet, and I think I mentioned it at maybe the last meeting, then we start working on developing our budget initiatives and priorities based on the information that we get from each school and from our cabinet, and then Mrs. DeBoer's lead team instructional meetings as well. Then in January, then we work with the cabinet to develop the initiatives. And as you know, you've heard about the big 3, so we talk a little bit about where we want to be. For instance, Mrs. Miller's presentation from Grantsville, where we talk about the Swiss program. That would be part of our next step initiative with PBIS. Are we going to put that in system-wide? Are there grant funds that can pay for that? Those kinds of things. We also talk about the packages and information that are required during the school-based meetings. We try and align our initiatives with the Board of Education goals and values, and we'll certainly talk more about that at our work session. The areas that you would like to see us either focus on or increase or decrease. We definitely look at the academic and behavioral data from each school. You heard Mrs. Miller say it when she was talking about Grantsville. That we look at those kinds of things and what we're seeing on our park scores, on our state rating systems, on all those kinds of things, on how we're doing, our graduation rates, our AP courses. And we look at that from each school, and we use that information to help us set our priorities. We already talked a little bit about legislative considerations, and then, of course, we already talked about enrollment trends. So we definitely look at those as we are working towards our recommendation for the board. So this year's, for our FY 2020, which is kind of amazing to say, we're already working on a 2020 budget. Our initiatives that we would like for you to consider: certainly continue to invest in our own employees, attracting and retaining high-quality professionals in all facets of the school system. And as we move towards the timeline, that's going to be very important in attracting and retaining high-quality professionals. Certainly implementing all of the ESSA standards. You heard me talk earlier about the increase in monitoring and how we're implementing the standards with fidelity for ESSA. Certainly enhancing the initiatives, our big three, but we don't ever want to just rest on those. We want to keep looking at other initiatives. We're looking at embedding technology, particularly at the middle and high school. I think I have that on another slide. You mentioned, Mr. Glotfeldy, looking at managing our healthcare expenses. We have been able, over many years, to keep healthcare costs, at least for our employees, as low as we possibly can. We have an excellent, very rich healthcare program. So we're trying very hard to manage those expenses as we look at our initiatives. And of course, continue to strategically plan with each department, setting our goals and looking at where we want to be in 2021 and 2025 and beyond. So I mentioned, again, certainly implementing, thank you, I keep switching it on this one and getting to this there. Implementing ESSA standards with excellence and fidelity. We're really looking at now, as we look at textbook refresh cycles, do we want to go towards more of a tech book, or do we want to continue to purchase textbooks? And of course, students' internet infrastructure in their own homes on what they have access to can sometimes impact that. Jeff is very knowledgeable on what that needs to look like and the things that students need at home to be able to make it work. BYOD is bring your own device. We are moving toward allowing students at the high schools to bring their own device. And we're also looking at the middle schools for a one-to-one initiative. We had a lot of requests for additional technology, and Jeff was saying, I think they have a lot of technology. Let's just look and see if we can go one-to-one. And so we're moving towards that initiative. We're really, when we look at our recommendations at our work session, we want to concentrate on behavior intervention and continuing to work on some of the behaviors that we're seeing, particularly at the elementary school, particularly with our youngest children. We would like to add that STARS classroom in the north. You know, we're moving towards PBIS in all schools, but of course enhancing that in every single school. And then aligning the behavior initiatives pre-K to 12, so that the students see similar rewards and incentives, similar structure of consequences, pre-K to 12 throughout the entire school system. And PBIS will go a long way in meeting that particular initiative.
I have a couple questions.
Okay, sure.
Do we don't currently have a lot of tech books, do we?
Tech books?
Yes.
We do not currently.
So what you were saying, for the tech books, if that's what we had, then the students would probably they'd have to have internet, correct?
Possibly.
No?
They wouldn't necessarily have to have internet at home they could download it, make it work while they were still at school to use at home.
Mr. Gank has a way that on the devices that we have, that before they would go home, it would kind of get a reboot, and then when they took it home, they wouldn't need internet access to be able to do the work that they needed to do at home.
Because I know a lot of people have internet. I know there's some that just don't have for different reasons, but like where we are, we have it, we switch a different one, we just aren't at a good location.
Right.
Like sometimes
Sure.
it doesn't matter how much money you pay, you do not have good.
It's just not, right, it's not
It's on and
accessible.
off.
Right.
So that's a concern for internet.
It
for,
is, yes.
Yeah.
But the technology has come to a point where that's not.
Did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, there's always, there's always like a plan B for that sort of thing. You know, whether it's downloading the resources to the local device and taking them home, meaning you don't have to have internet at home, or down to just printing out a hard copy on paper of a lesson or something like that. So they all offer different levels of accessibility.
Mhm.
So the idea, though, is that within the building, you can utilize the technology and, because obviously the internet is the building, but if you need that stuff from home, if you don't have access to the internet, all of these providers, we wouldn't select a provider that didn't offer a solution for somebody who doesn't have internet at home.
Now, because this is pretty new to me, like, you know, the kids get a textbook, usually they can take them home if they need to. You know, sometimes they get lost or damaged, and then the parent is supposed to pay. So what would be the price of a textbook, just an idea versus a textbook? Do you have an idea? I'm just kind of curious.
Well, the tech book is really the license for the device that the student would have. And so the one-to-one initiative is such that a student who is entering a specific grade would receive a specific device, and that device would be that child's device.
Okay.
It would have the fixed asset numbers on it, and they would sign, just like they do with their books, that this is their, even though it's Garrett County Public Schools material, you're using it for the duration of this time period. So the devices that we're going one-to-one are really fairly affordable. We do have a lot of the supplies, and you can talk at any time, that we can repair them, and we have the expertise on hand to repair to a certain extent. But there have been instances, even before this model that we're looking at, where parents have had to pay for devices or for certain parts of the devices. And I do want to get back to the tech book versus textbook. In our last several curriculum purchases, we have purchased a blended model where we've received an actual textbook, but we also have the license for 6 or 8 years. And so it's really embedding in instruction, utilizing the license as much as you would use the textbook.
The actual book.
So we're sort of like tipping our toe into the waters, but we're going to get to a point, and it's probably going to be English, because that's the next large area of study that is up in 2 years to start purchasing a new curriculum if we go that way. Do we make a decision? Certain grades need a hard book, and then if this one-to-one model works, are there other grades that may not need, or they might just need a classroom set? And so we buy just a classroom set, but each student just uses it when they're there. These are all things that we've got a model, we've got to really.
Well, we need to involve the teachers in all those
That was my
decisions.
next question. Like, what is the input of the teachers? Is there some in favor of textbook, more others like the textbooks?
Like anything else, both. But as Mrs. Schweitzer said, anytime we're adopting a new textbook or we always have a teacher committee where we would look at those kinds of things. Which classes would it work best for? Which classes would they feel like it wouldn't work for? So we would involve teachers and principals in all of those decisions.
I know for the technology part, we have in the budget for many years been allocated a certain amount to keep
to refresh them,
like the teachers, and to keep getting more to get the initiative one-to-one. I guess another concern with that too be textbooks. If you had more of the devices, will we have to like rewire some of the schools or have them placed to charge them? You know what I mean? Like, or will we need more you know what I mean?
Well, I think Mr. Yank is.
How does that go?
I mean, it's not a matter of like rewiring a school or providing more electricity to a school or anything like that. We might have to buy extra charging stations, which Most of our schools have a dozen or so of these anyways. So you might have to have more of those. You might have to strategically place them throughout the building so that the students have access to them throughout the day and that sort of thing. But it's not a major change to the infrastructure of the building. There's no changes to bandwidth or anything like that. It's, we've built the infrastructure to support this type of initiative.
Okay.
And that's kind of, I think, why it's into this.
I have like one more question. When you said about bring your own device, you said possibly the high school, that's the discussion. That's not happening now, right? Maybe in next year.
You have to have a policy.
Right, but I mean, it's not happening right now?
It's not happening right now, but it
Okay.
could possibly
Right.
happen before next school year.
And that's for the high school?
Correct.
And then Ms. Seabolt said was
We have a policy
good.
and procedure that we wrote several years ago on bring your own device.
I think we did. We had a big discussion about that. I didn't remember when I
We did.
first
Policy's been
came.
in place for
Yeah, it's been about 3
now.
years.
Yeah.
And it's
I
left
remember.
up to the building administrator and the teachers to implement that, and we've just not had many people pick up on it.
Aren't there security issues? Okay.
Well, again, we built the infrastructure to support and keep ourselves secure. from
Even
this
with
standpoint.
people's own devices?
Sorry, say that.
Even when people bring in their own devices?
Yeah, like those devices are on a segmented network that don't have, it's kind of walled off from our servers and that sort of thing. We put all those things in place before we built this policy, so that when we did build the policy, if we had people jump on it, we were good.
I think you had another question, Mr. Buffalo, or?
Well, I think Ms. Couture had some.
I was just going to comment that currently in the high school there has been, like our student council is currently working on like a pro and con list of the bring your own device policy, so it's in motion. I think at least at Southern High School, I've not heard that much about Northern High School.
And I was going to ask you,
would be interesting to
what do
share.
you prefer to learn on, the electronic devices or the actual?
I would
textbook?
prefer the tech book because that would be less books that you'd have to carry around. So like one computer versus 5 textbooks saves a
So
lot
you
of
like the
space.
tech?
That's my personal opinion. I'm not speaking on behalf of
No,
all
but
of
you were
my
asking for her
students.
personal
Yes, I
opinion.
was. And
Okay. So then-
how your fellow students look at the technology.
We can do a poll if that's
That would be nice.
I think a lot of the benefit to those type of things also are just the content that can be offered from an electronic standpoint. So if you think of like taking a government class in the high school and understanding that the content that you're teaching can be modified by the vendor to kind of interact with what's happening today, you know, government shutdown 2 weeks ago, that sort of thing. So what you're teaching can be reactive to what's happening in the real world, and it helps with engagement.
One more question. Under behavior intervention, you have STARS Classroom North. We did have it at Accent last year, and then this year we relocated to Broadford. So where would it be in the north if that?
Grantsville.
Grantsville?
But we would retain the one at Brockford.
Correct.
This
We're
would be
adding-
in addition.
Right.
Not moving it again from Broadford.
Right.
This would be in addition.
And it would be like the pre-K to fifth for the northern end of the county.
Correct.
Would be the.
Might not start out that depending on what we are able to staff. It might be started in the week. Right.
Yeah. And we already implement it in a different way at middle school and high school level.
Correct.
Because this year you brought third, fourth, and fifth
Correct.
into.
But we're looking at aligning what is currently our CPA program with
Right,
the STARS program. That's part of what we're talking about there with
The aligning.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so to continue on with the fiscal year 20 instructional goals and priority, the headline is still the same, implement ESSA standards with excellence and fidelity. Several, I don't know if, I believe it was the last meeting or the meeting before, we continue to have presentations by Mr. Morris. We continue to look at our, where our highest needs are academically. So we're continuing to enhance our response to intervention model, both academically and with our behavior goals. We want to continue that instruction meets the needs of all students. I said that in the original goal. All students means all, no matter what school, no matter what area of the county you live in. We know that we have a gap for special education students. I think we need to move towards a model of some more specially designed instruction for special education students. And we're also, I mentioned it earlier, the increased measuring and monitoring of the gifted and talented program. And so we need to really look at that instruction to make sure we are meeting those needs. I remember a presentation, I think Mrs. Proudfoot set it up many years ago when she was coordinating staff development, and we had a gentleman named Mike Maddows. It was when we were first starting on the RTI program. And what he said, one of the very first things that he said to the group, and you may remember, Mrs. Proudfoot, what he said, but he said, Garrett County Schools does an excellent job in the middle. He said, we need to work on our special needs students, and we need to look at our gifted so that we are, the instruction is meeting the needs of all students pre-K to 12, no matter what their ability level. So I think we really need to keep enhancing RTI so that we're meeting those needs of all students. And as we look at elementary mathematics, when we look at our data there, we see a need to put some resources into elementary mathematics as well. Yes?
Gifted and talented, many years ago, the students were pulled out of their classroom, correct, and you had an actual teacher that worked on maybe once a week or something, but now their teacher does it within the classroom. Is that what we do?
Correct. We had, at the elementary level, we had three. It was called SCP at that time, thank you. As we crunched the budget, we did eliminate those at the elementary level. But while the classroom teacher is expected, it's also a way of, they call it compacting or differentiating instruction so that you are meeting the needs of all students. So that was one when we eliminated the SCP teachers. That was kind of our rationale.
Mm-hmm. So are we trying to get back to having someone to work with them once a week or something instead of doing it in the classroom? Like,
defer that to Mrs. DeVore.
We're looking very closely at that. What we're doing right now is we're reevaluating. We have an identification process in Garrett County that Mrs. Proudfoot put together a team in 2013. And that was at the time where when we had phased out the GT teachers, the SCP teachers, and how we were identifying and how we were meeting the needs. Part of that was, Mrs. Baker's right, part of it was compacting, differentiating within the classroom, but then part of it also was at the individual building level, matching up students with experts in the field to do individualized studies and things like that. And again, as the years went on, it's looking very different at different schools. So right now we're at a process where we're trying to focus in on our identification process again, because we have to put in this new requirement for the universal screener. So we're trying to incorporate that. We're trying to take it a little bit slowly so we don't just jump on all at once. But
well, and the other reason we're not jumping on all at once is because MSDE is still defining what the restrictions are, what the expectations are.
Right.
So we're trying to take one step at a time.
We don't want to jump in too fast and go in the wrong direction. But we are looking very closely at our GT programs, both the identification process and the implementation of actual programming to students.
So do we have any idea when they'll have it figured out what they expect? I mean, don't look like... Oh, not for a little while then.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
This slide we've titled Critical Priorities with our support services. And the first one, this Board of Education and many of the folks in the room have heard me say on many occasions that one of the greatest areas of need, but also one of the greatest areas that we really need to move towards is providing that safe, secure environment for all of our students, all of our staff, and stakeholders. It's not just in the physical, in the safety vestibules that we've talked about in our capital discussions, but also cybersecurity, the management of our data systems, risk management on where our areas of risks are within the organization, and every member of our organization contributing to that safe and secure environment for all students, so that we can then reach our instructional goals as well. So that is a critical priority as we move forward. There is some governor's budget, there is some grant money that we are we're working towards. It's not a ton of money, it's not enough for capital projects, but it will allow us to do some things that we've wanted to do for a while to increase safety. But Mr. Gank walked out before. He's our data cybersecurity, and we really need to be making sure that we are addressing that so that we don't have any, we don't have anything happen. Do you want to add anything there on the risk management part?
Well, we hold a lot of sensitive data.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very important that not only when you talk about security, you just don't think about the physical security, but also another facet is with food and nutrition services. So Scott Germain has worked he's working actually with Dr. Bulleson on a new training program for some of his staff. So as a support staff member, we're constantly brainstorming the ways in our areas that we're at risk, whatever the risk might be.
You'll see the next one, continue to attract, develop, and maintain highly qualified staff. I mentioned earlier, this is, again, all members of the organization. Certainly, this board is aware that there are certain areas where we're having more difficulties attracting highly qualified teachers. We want to make sure that our pay is commensurate with other districts so that we are attracting and able to retain employees. I know I'm working very closely with Dr. Willison on a timeline for postings and interviews this year so that we get the best of the best as they graduate or as they're ready to move to a new district. And then always, of course, managing increasing costs because we do know our buildings are aging. And so we have to always be thinking of capital projects that are going to help with our aging infrastructure. And that's nothing new to certainly this board. And of course, our ongoing priorities. Again, we are in an ever-changing compliance environment. I mentioned earlier, all the title programs, the oversight and the compliance is changing. What we are able to spend funds on is always changing. For example, I do want to make sure I say this. Title II, which is a grant that Mrs. DeVore runs, we're no longer able to use it on staff. We used to use it on the class size reduction teachers. I believe they're disallowing that as one of the ways that we can use that money. So we have to pick that up in our operating budget, but it can be used for professional development. So you may see a difference in our budget this year. We may lower what county is paying for on professional development and increasing those teachers that we used to pay out of Title II. It would be similar for things in Perkins, in our CTE. If there are things we're not able to purchase anymore, we could pick those up in the operating budget, but there are things that we can use to use grant funds to pay for. So we may see a different look to our budget this year, different areas that we've been able to kind of change and manipulate based on those regulations. And again, we talked about it earlier, anything in the legislative session that's going to impact us, we're constantly looking at that. We're always leveraging technology to help us build efficiencies. As Mrs. Schweitzer said, every single department looks at ways that we can become more efficient, from maintenance to HR to finance. So we're always looking at those areas where we can gain some efficiencies. And as Mr. Glotfeldy said, we're always looking at those trends in healthcare costs. ways that we can offer our employees different packages or different things that we can keep costs down. We're constantly looking at ways that we can put that in the budget to help with those healthcare costs. Because the national trend is always increasing on those costs. I think I only have, yep. So the next steps, we talked a little bit at the very beginning about the budget cycle. We have set the February 25th date as a special budget work session. Like I said, at the very beginning of the process, we look at the goals, the board values when we're determining some of our budget priorities. We want to hear from you on some of the priorities and things that you feel we need to make sure are in the budget. The request is due to the commissioners the amount on what the board is, what we're going to be requesting. March 12th will be the budget presentation, the superintendent budget presentation after the work session. On the 19th, you'll see that is a tentative date. That is the date that Mr. Knoll asked me if I would be available to present to the commissioners. And I really wanted to make sure I say thank you, because for several years we weren't given that opportunity to present our budget to the commissioners. And since I've been superintendent, we've been able to do that each year. And now he's reaching out to me to set that date. So I think that is that's really helped our relationship and our work with the county. If that date doesn't work, I can get him some other dates that will work so that you all can be in attendance as well. That is just a tentative date that we set. And then we have set again a tentative date of April 9th at our April board meeting. And the reason that we wanted to add that onto this slide is important for us to, if we can approve the budget at the April meeting, it will align with the calendar Dr. Wilderson and I have set up for the hiring process. So if there are any new positions or realignment of positions in the budget, that we can start advertising and recruiting for some of those positions that we know are going to be harder to fill. So that'll help meet our goal of having highly qualified personnel throughout the organization. And then I think the last one is,
On March 19th, because it's the first we've seen it, the one with the county commissioners, does that work for all the commissioners? And apparently, if
I believe it does. Since I didn't ask that, but since Mr. Knoll reached out to me, I'm assuming that is a regular meeting for the Board of Commissioners that they would like to. He had given me another date that I was unavailable, so that he gave me that date.
And then February 25th, I knew we did a doodle poll. So that's when it's set for our budget work session. Is that open to the public, or we have an executive beforehand?
I believe, and again, that's up to the board. I believe Mr. Paul and I talked about a 4 to 5 o'clock executive session, and then a 5 to 6:30, or as long as the board needs for the work session that evening.
Okay.
If you want to change that, we can certainly do that.
If another time was better, but the 4 was for the executive, and then 5.
Right.
And then that would be public.
So if anybody want to come from the public, the doors would be open at 5. That's what.
Yes. Unless the board votes, unless you would like to change that.
You're just talking about the operating budget here, very good. And what's the schedule for the capital budget?
The capital budget was already approved because for the FY20, I explained that the funding, right, so the state needs it by the end of October. So it had already been sent over to the county, and they had agreed to the Southern High School project that we were talking about. Now, there are some other things that we may request to be included in capital that the state doesn't participate in. Yeah. And so those requests are, we need to let them know we're thinking about asking for them, and then we pretty much firm it up on March 19th that this is why, but if I can talk to Mr. Weeks and explain to him, we're thinking maintenance of effort, but we're also thinking X, Y, and Z projects that you would put into capital.
Great.
That's really what they need a gauge so that they can start getting their work done too.
Yep.
Yeah, in the past few years, we've done some one-time type of things through this.
Correct. Yeah.
Extra.
But yes.
Just when we talk about the revenue and how the local funding and the inflation index went up 1.1%, does the county commissioners, they're aware of that? Is that's coming from the local funding from last year to this year?
Their maintenance.
Right, but that's all,
That's the
that's not just
Right.
maintenance of that.
Right, but that's more on their part there a little bit, right? The 1%?
Well, the reason, it's coupled with the fact that they were required to increase
Right,
by
right.
27, and then we had additional students. Mr. Weeks is very aware.
Okay, that was my question. If they are aware of this number, that's what I meant.
We
Okay.
have agreed to that number.
Okay, that was my question, if they're aware of
And so
it.
it's very much like the state number. Before this presentation, we always compare our spreadsheets and agree that this is the amount. But then obviously, this number has to go to the state, and the state has to approve it.
Right, okay.
All right, so we'll have the meeting coming up on the 25th, and look forward to that.
Are we setting the time as 4 definitely?
And that was the time that was on the doodle poll, but unless there's objections.
Yeah, I didn't see their what was it? Doodle poll said 25th.
Well, there was 4 days. 4 days we could choose.
That was the only one that everyone was available. And we just confirmed that at like 2 o'clock this morning, so.
All right.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, very nice presentation.
Thank you.
You can go when we get to the.
Yeah, we were doing so well until you went to that side of the table.
I'm sorry.
Dark side.
Very important work.
That's good, thank you. The 2019-2020 calendar.
What's interesting, as Mrs. Baker was sharing, it's amazing that we're going over the FY20 budget. Well, now we're going to do the calendar, so we're staying with that theme. So the first thing I want to share that tonight, we as a calendar committee would like to make a recommendation for the 2019-2020 school calendar. But I want to share with you that there will be a public session comment period that will begin tomorrow and will run through March 8th. All the public comments will be combined through the public.info@garrettcountypublicschools.org. A public release will also be sent tomorrow. If our public would like to make comments via mail, they'll know that information on the release. And then the board will actually vote on the calendar at the March 12th meeting. So the first thing I want to share with you is that this is actually the first step in crafting the 2019-2020 school calendar. As we know, Governor Hogan established an executive order that had some stipulations with post-Labor Day start and ending the school calendar before June 15th. There is some legislation that's pending right now, House Bill 128 on the school calendars, which is called School Calendar Flexibility Bill, that would allow each local Board of Ed to have clear decision-making authority to adopt a local school calendar before Labor Day. In addition to that, just passed in the Senate this evening actually was an overturn of the executive order to complete the 180-day requirement for June 15th. So that's still moving, they're actually moving parts in legislation right now. So the calendar committee actually met 2 times. They met January 11th and February 11th, yesterday. We had 20 members on the committee. We had the student board member, who was a great addition. We had a board member. We had 6 county office administrators. We had a bus driver. We had 2 building administrators. One was represented in elementary as well as secondary. We had 4 parents. Of those parents, one is a parent that actually works at Garrett College, and we also had a business owner from those 4 parents. We had representative from our GCEA, from our GCAFT. We had 2 teachers to support, and then I was the chair of the committee. We had a vote from this recommendation that we're presenting tonight, which was a 20 out of 20 for the pre-Labor Day calendar start. The pre-Labor calendar start was recommended because with the notion of getting 180 days based on COMAR in session without asking for any type of waiver in the event of inclement weather. Also to get all the days that we can in for our students prior to testing. So the calendar that you see, the proposed calendar, has a start date of August 26th, which is a Monday, 5 days prior to the Labor Day. And an ending date, in the event that no inclement weather, it would be May 28th, with 11 days built into the calendar for makeup days. In the calendar, in addition, the calendar committee incorporated 7 staff development days. Those staff development days are embedded in the calendar each month, excluding November and May. Those days are built in to ensure that we are moving that needle again towards highly qualified. Our staff needs to have the requirement for certification and allows us to do the staff development in the afternoon versus having substitutes for our staff, as well as the curriculum alignment work and assessment work. The calendar committee also, we did look at graduation dates based on the dates that we had to ensure that we had, again, enough time built in for inclement weather for our students to ensure that 1,080 hours that our high school students need to fulfill, as well as to avoid the high school playoffs. The calendar committee was recommending May 30th as that date. And lastly, looking at the proposed items within the calendar are the parent conferences. Parent conferences actually had a lot of discussion. The calendar committee is recommending from the proposed calendar 2 dates, November the 4th, 2019, and January 28th, 2020. And the reason why, again, we have those 2 dates that we're recommending on the calendar is because it's in the negotiated agreement that we have 2 parent conferences as well as in policy. Actually, the policy number 3422, parent-teacher conferences, states that we have 2 parent conferences. Those conferences also work towards the 187-day contract that our certified employees are required to fulfill.
So why are they so close together?
Okay, so thank you. So the reason why we made that change, the first one, November, is traditionally about the same time period. It's after the first grading term. There was a lot of discussion from the committee. We asked the committee to go out to the staff, parents, and you can see from our distribution of the members on the team, we had a wide array of feedback. And it was recommended that we have the second parent conference closer to the beginning of the second semester or end of second term. And the reason for that is to look at student retentions, to look at the interventions. If we have a student that is failing, they would rather, again, our staff, parents would rather know that more in the middle of the year versus end of third term, because that's when we traditionally have had it as well. So really moving up that date. Now, another item that was really floating, if we're maximizing the time for those parent conferences, that elementary and middle school would keep the same traditional conference schedule, but high school felt if they're really trying to be beneficial for parents and for students, it would be to have an open house. So the open house, the dates would be the same for all 3 levels, but the focus would be about open house for that second semester, meeting the parents, kind of like a back to school night again for second semester parents. We think that would be a better draw.
It was actually I thought a very good discussion. And the date was very much driven by the elementary people. Mm-hmm. And I understand their position, because if they wait too long and you're going to retain someone, then the first question I'm going to ask is parents, why didn't I know sooner? Yeah. The high school principals, I thought, come up with a very good plan, mm-hmm. and because it's going to be the beginning of their second semester, so they're going to have all new teachers. So let's make this an open house, introduce those teachers, introduce the school to those parents who now have new teachers. really, I thought it came across as a very, very good plan.
And I want to share with you, based on, again, the calendar, the end, again, if all follows suit with no inclement weather, the end of the term would be January 15th. So the committee felt like, let's move the date so that it's within, as close as we can to the beginning of the second term or the second semester, but allow for some snow days so that we don't have to keep having a floating day. So that's why the committee landed on, our recommendation would be January 28th, so that it's allowing for a time span, I think it's actually 10 days after the term, and more than likely we're going to have a couple snow days in there, but that day would not float. That day would stay solid as at the parent conference.
The other thing too that I thought was well done was the fact that they, on staff development days, they ensured that it didn't fall on the same day of the week, so that it was spread out throughout the school year by month, but also by day of the week. So you're not always infringing on the same day of the week, depending on what those students might have. So,
especially for resources
yeah,
for elementary, not missing
right.
that resource the same time.
I really thought there was a lot of forward thinking that went into the calendar.
So those are just some of the dates that we've proposed and some of the items. But I would like to ask just to consider with parent conferences. Something that came up was, do we need two parent conferences? In the world we live in today, with the communication tools that are instantaneous, with Power School, with email, with texting, with some of the apps like Classroom Dojo, Remind, Blooms, that there's a lot of ongoing communication. And we felt like this would be a time to just open up for discussion to see that would you consider thinking about having one parent conference, having that mid-year, knowing that there's ongoing communication. And it's not something that we're asking you to consider for this year, because we would like to put a survey out. We would like to really survey the staff, parents, have public feedback on this particular item. But if we did, it would, again, change policy, and it would have to be changed in the negotiated agreement.
I'll just give you my 2 cents. I think these parent conferences are really important. Even though you can have communication via internet and everything else, I think it's really important for that parent to show their kids they're interested in them, and they actually go in and meet with the teacher and the other professionals in that school. It's whether they're doing excellently or whether they're doing a poor job. I just think it shows support for that student, and the student really understands that. I think that gee, my parents think enough about what I'm doing in school that I'm actually going to that they're actually going to go in and talk to them. So that's just my 2 cents.
Another thing that we did discuss about only one parent-teacher conference day was that's a whole day that students are getting off before park testing, AP testing, all of the testing that goes on. So just having that one extra day doesn't seem like a lot, but it actually is a lot. Having that one day before the testing versus after.
I think you go into that double-edged sword. They're really important for elementary school. Very important. And middle school, I'm sure, as well. When you get to high school, not so much. Not so much. You know, the people,
you're right.
Usually the parents who come are the ones who have kids who are doing really well.
And
Maybe that, but yes,
I want you to be aware that this point was actually raised by the parents, because they felt like the time that we're in is more digital, is more that communication that's ongoing throughout the year. But also, please know that it is a common practice that if there's not just the parent conference days, that there's a need to meet with a parent, it's happening during the day, or it's on a late night, or it's actually before school. So that is already happening.
Yeah. And go ahead. I was just going to say, it's really just, it was just food for thought to start thinking about the possibility. So.
For years, many years ago, the parent conferences used to be in the evening, but we do them now during school, and the kids aren't at school. Is that because of their contract, right? They can only be there so many hours a day?
That's correct.
For
It
people
is.
that
Within
are
the-
listening, and so they understand why.
That's
they're-
correct. Within our working conditions, right now, the negotiated agreement actually says that that the duty day cannot exceed 38 hours. Now, again,
Duty week.
excuse me, yeah, duty week cannot extend more than 38 hours. The given duty day is 7.6 hours. So we would extend that. Now, again, this would be a conversation item. It would be discussion with the union to be able to modify that if they felt it was in the best interest. And I do think they'd be up for discussion should that be the direction that we want to go.
Do you remember what made it? Because with my older daughters, they were all at nighttime. My younger ones, it was during the day. They missed school. What made it switch from evening to daytime?
It was the paying, it was the hours.
Is that what it was?
For support staff, they wanted support people there, and to do that, they had to pay time and a half or whatever if they went over their time. So that was the reason that it was changed.
There were different models.
And then we worked on having it like 11 to 7, so, because if you do it during the day and people work, then they have.
It's not much value if it's during the day.
No, and that's, and so then we asked to have 11 to 7 at schools, and I don't know what that's morphed into now.
Well, so
To
again,
this whole day.
There are some
Of
options.
regular hours.
So right now, the model we have in place is that it's a day off for students, okay? And so that's the model we currently have.
What's the hours? What's the hours?
So it actually, for high school, it's 10 to 5:30, and for elementary, it's, for secondary, it's 10 to 5:30, and elementary, it was 11 to 7:30. However, that's also a discussion point that the committee felt like, based on, again, other feedback from Mrs. Baker's T3 committee, that they really wanted to be the same. Parents felt like, you know what, we want them all to be the same, because there are evening activities that we can't take our students to, or that our kids are involved in something in the evening. So they felt like, let's just make it all consistent. Whatever the time is, make it consistent for all 3 levels. But back to the different models. So again, right now we have where students are off. In the past, we have had them during the evenings, like it was an extension of 4:30 to 7:30. But what's happened is the change in contract with the 38-hour week. So if we did a day where we extended the agreement would have to extend the duty day, but if we did, again, I'm just throwing this out as an idea, let's say we had like an early dismissal, but the teacher worked into the evening so that you had that extra time, because those two parent conferences work 7.6 hours towards the 187 days. Remember, students are in session 180, but those additional 7 are the professional days for the teachers. So that could be an option. Or have it on a week that's a shortened week. Again, I'm just throwing this out. Like, for example, Martin Luther King week. It's a shortened week, so then you're not going over that 38 hours within the week. Those are just some ideas to just float around.
Well, I think you really ought to work for the evening meetings again. I think that's beneficial, because there's a lot of parents that can't get there in the daytime. Even if it costs a little bit more to do it. But then it gets back to you want 1 or 2.
Right. So
Maybe
anyway,
one.
so the items that I proposed on the calendar from the recommendation from the calendar committee would be a pre-Labor Day start with those items, again, staff development, the parent conferences, and also 11 snow days are built into that calendar. Also, on those snow days, right now, the recommendation from the calendar committee is to incorporate Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
I've seen that, yes.
Okay? So we incorporated that because we felt like if we know we have lots of snow events in October and November to appeal to the state, ask for permission, because that's how we can use it. We can't have it as one of the 180 days, but we can ask the state. But remember, we'd have to do that in November to
Right,
ask
so they
for
have
that.
it for the
Yeah, so we'd
meeting.
have to be very strategic based on the number of days we miss and the timing of the year. Okay?
On the box here, we have these dates are used in numerical order beginning with February 17th. Should we remove that sentence then?
Well, it actually, and you're correct, that should be changed to because I added that January 20th. Is that what you meant?
Yeah,
Yes.
either change it or take it
Yeah.
out.
In the beginning, when you started talking, I didn't catch it all. You were talking about House Bill 128. You started saying about 180 days, 70 hours. Now, what was that you were saying? I didn't.
So what's happening? Remember the governor's executive order?
Yes.
That says post-Labor Day start, and you have to be done by June 15th.
Correct.
Well, there's 2 bills right now happening in legislation. Okay? So that bill is actually House Bill 128. It's called School Calendar Flexibility Bill. So that is actually the Maryland Senate just overturned the executive order this evening, actually, and which would eliminate that June 15th deadline. But in addition to that, the bill would eliminate the need to ask for a waiver. So local school boards would be able to determine their calendar and be pre-Labor Day or post-Labor Day, and you wouldn't have to ask for a waiver.
But you still have to have your 180 days and your hours.
Yeah.
And if you had to go after June 15th, you would if this went through. Right, because the way it is now, you cannot go past June the 15th.
That is correct, unless you ask for an extension, unless you ask for a waiver.
Right.
So it would take off, if you think about it kind of like bookends, you know, that the bills and legislation would eliminate the bookends. You still have to have 180 hours, you have to get, 180 days, 1,080 hours within the school year for the students.
Okay.
Question, as far as the school calendar, have you surveyed the parents in Garrett County to see what they would prefer? A post-Labor Day or a pre-Labor Day start?
Well, we haven't surveyed the parents, but we do put this out for public comment to get feedback from the parents. And we do have parents on the committee.
Okay.
So that's how we do get feedback.
We get a lot of feedback. That's probably one of our hot topics. We will receive a lot of feedback.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I've read some letters and everything, but you know, the governor claims it's the most popular executive order he's issued since he's been in office. That it's really widely. The public likes it a lot because it gives them more flexibility on vacations. Their kids can work up to Labor Day and that type of thing. So I just, you know, and I understand the weather, although heavens knows it's changing. Sometimes it looks like there's worse weather down east than there is in Garrett County in the last 2 or 3 years, but that might just be a temporary trend.
But just to make sure that you're aware that Garrett County does have an exemption because.
I know
Okay,
that.
I just want to make sure you're aware of that.
And as far as these bills, I mean, do you know if the Senate bill, there was a veto?
It was
proof?
31 to 13 vote
So it could be
overturned.
Okay.
Overturn the governor.
It could overturn the veto. I mean, the governor will probably veto it, but then
Right.
it's enough majority.
So that's what we've heard. That's what we've heard.
Yeah, you can veto
And then
it.
you put in.
Right,
And the House
the
has it?
voters decide
House
to
has
put
it.
it on a
in each
referendum.
district.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions on that? Again, thank you so
So
much.
this will be at, what are the dates this will be?
So yes, which brings me back to my opening remarks. So, my note here. So the public comment will open tomorrow and it'll run through March the 8th.
Okay.
And then Mr. Morse gets them to us. Mr. Gladfeldy. Mr. Morse sends them all to us to.
All the comments?
Yes.
And then the calendar we brought back for a vote on March 12th.
Okay, thank you. And then we're going to go back to this year's calendar.
Yes. So the next discussion point, just as we just talked about the makeup days. In the current calendar, 2018-19 calendar, the board decided that they wanted to use April 22nd as a potential makeup day. So, so tonight, we would like to discuss with the board, would you want to consider asking the State Board of Education to grant Garrett County Public Schools a waiver request to open schools on Monday after Easter as an inclement weather makeup day for the 2018-19 calendar? If the board would vote to request the calendar modification, the state board would meet on February 26th to approve this request.
What's your recommendation?
What's the feeling of the
You're
board?
recommending that you do that?
We did it in the past before, I do recall.
Actually, we had, Mrs. Brewer did a lot of research on this. And the last time, in 2013-14, Garrett County Public Schools used Easter Monday as a makeup day.
It's the last time.
That was the last time.
Yeah, because we voted last year, we didn't do it.
I think what we could do, Easter's late enough this year, we could request it.
That's correct.
And then
Yeah, it
decide
wouldn't be
at
like the
next meeting.
President's Day one where we
Right.
had to decide. We would have plenty of time.
And then
if
in
you
March
wanted
we
to
could-
ask, and then, then we
So you
could
have the
see.
waiver
It
approved.
wouldn't hurt to
Yeah,
request
get
it
it approved.
in case we do have
Yeah, a lot of
more
snow days. yeah, between now and
inclement
then.
weather, and then not use it.
Right.
Yeah.
You could decide, if you decided, if we asked for the waiver, or the having school that day, the March 12th meeting, you could decide. And that's another month out of whether we had snow days. And then that's still, Mr. Paul is correct, it's still another month and a half almost till Easter. So it would be plenty of,
17th. yeah.
it's a big day for it, yeah.
So yeah, so is there a motion you want to do that?
I move we request a waiver.
Okay, motion to request Easter Monday.
Second.
And second, then moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. That motion's approved, so we'll go ahead and request that, and then in March, we'll make an announcement.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, I didn't mean to insinuate you didn't have any.
I'm just kidding. IT hardware infrastructure upgrade.
Okay, so in October, the board approved the use of fiscal 18 carryover funds for some IT infrastructure upgrades, upgrading the wireless in the county, and upgrading the firewall. These are being purchased through the E-rate program, which means we have a reimbursement rate of 70%, and so you go through all the processes that E-rate requires. We put it out bid and everything, and we've done all that. We received our proposals, and I'm recommending accepting a proposal from CDWG for the wireless project, which came in at $63,000. And for the firewall project, the proposal came in at $36,000.
You ever done work with those two entities before?
Borderland will be a new vendor for us. CDWG is the company who installed the data center at Bitterbrook, so we have a long history with them.
You're satisfied with Borderlands' work as
Yeah.
far as you know what
Yeah, we've gotten demo models and that sort of thing. We've interacted with them in the past. We've just never been in a position to make any sort of big moves. And then whenever the opportunity to request it through E-rate, we decided to wait until that cycle came around to make that sort of thing. Yeah, that's actually part of. So Borderland sells a product that's made by a company called Fortinet, and those are the devices that we actually requested on both of these two, the wireless and the firewall. We put Fortinet down as our preferred vendors. What you're allowed to do, you can say a vendor or a make or model or equivalent to that sort of thing. CDWG actually sells a different make. They sell Cisco devices. they saw, I think, that we wanted Fortinet devices, and that's why the proposal came in so low, is because they knew they had to come in very aggressively with the prices in order to win the bid.
Right.
And they did.
Okay.
I know before you explained this, it was in October, and how we got 70% of it back once it was complete, and the importance. But as I was thinking about it, reading over your memo that was sent to us, the firewall project, that would be at Dennett Road, correct?
That's where the equipment resides, but the entire county utilizes it.
Right, but the firewalls for the equipment. So my question was, like, other entities in the county, their equipment is stored there, right, or housed there? So do they pay any part of the firewall, or is that just the board? Like, I'm just trying to...
Yeah, no, that's a valid question. We would be the only ones utilizing the equipment. It would be residing in the same data center, but nobody else actually. I mean, the networks are segmented between us and the hospital and the county government, college. We all utilize something within that data center, and we're the only ones who would actually be utilizing this equipment.
Okay.
So nobody else gets the benefits of it or anything like that. Only our traffic travels through.
Okay, that's what I was... And then the 70% that we'll get reimbursed, is that from the wireless infrastructure that the IT will handle, or is it the borderland network? So what part do we actually get reimbursed? Both components together, okay.
Yeah, all of the figures you see there, the 63,000 and the 36,000, that's all eligible for reimbursement. Now with the wireless, it's going to be something that we install ourselves. We do that over the course of a fiscal year or so, and they reimburse us as we get done. So we finish up Crellin Elementary School, we send them a letter saying it's been installed, and we get reimbursed for the portion of the project.
So then when we're reimbursed, what department what area in the budget where this money will get put back into?
Well, see, it crosses fiscal year, so that's why we were using carryover to fund this project. Because normally with the operating budget, you do everything in your power to have the reimbursement happen within the same fiscal year. When we were working with the E-rate consultant, it was simply impossible to be able to have all of the expense reimbursed within the same fiscal year. So it will hit in the FY 2020 fiscal year.
So like if we was looking at the budget book, where would we, I understand it's going to cross over more than one fiscal year, but like where would the money be? If I say, Allison, where's this money we're getting back, the 70% from the?
Well, it would go under other local revenue.
Other local, okay.
All right, so we're looking at $125,000 project budget that you want to get approved here. Do we need to approve do we need to approve the individual proposals or just the whole budget? All right, okay.
You can approve both.
Just making sure. So
Yes.
so 125,000 project budget. I heard a motion somewhere. Mr. Woods, second. Mr. Gladfeldy. Further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. It is approved, so we're good for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Budget amendment.
Okay, so as a result of these great proposals that we received, we are recommending that the board take action this evening on amending the FY19 operating budget to remove $175,000 from the operations line, from the operation category, due to the fact that the project has a new estimated expenditure amount of $125,000.
All right, so the recommendations there, is there a motion to approve it?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Woods, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Gladfeldy. Discussion?
So, I have the paper in front of me. So the amount of money that I had asked previously, I'm going to ask you. When I asked about, when we took the $600,000 that was in the proposal for the new operating budget, Yeah, from a carryover, and I said, we had 2.7 million then. So would this be then, if this is all agreed on, this 175,000, would it be added to the 2.7 million?
Yes, it would be.
And then, my next question, just to make sure I understand. When we're talking more with our consultants and we know our plan and all that, if at some time we thought that we wanted to use some of this money for capital projects, then it could be done once it's put into this fund balance for a one-time need for capital project?
There would have to be a budget amendment.
Right.
Created.
Uh-huh.
And then, of course, the Board of Education would approve it, and then the county commissioners would have to approve it as well.
But it could be done. If
And
okay.
it's eligible for match, I think, too.
Well, depending. Like if we just did something like when they did, I believe, I wasn't on the board, Bradford Portables, that was used as carryover money. That wasn't a state match, right? Do you know? Was it? It was just.
No, it's just
We used
local money.
carryover.
Yeah.
But the point is, the state, you could use it for projects that you could get a state match on.
Yes.
Yes.
You
Yes.
can. For
Yes.
capital projects.
Yeah.
If the county was unwilling or unable to fund, we could use fund balance for the local portion.
Right.
Yeah.
Or work out some agreement with them.
Yes.
Correct.
You're right.
All right, so we have a motion.
Can I ask a question off that? I mean, I probably perhaps know the answer, but if one is $63,750 and the other one's $36,355, that doesn't come to $125,000.
No, but there's labor
Yeah,
for the project.
it doesn't.
That's not in the, what you approved were the expenditures that were above the threshold. There were other labor that's part of the project, that our staff will have overtime hours. We're gonna, like, the project in its entirety to be finished is estimated at $125,000.
I see what you're saying. It's a good question, Mr. Woods, too.
Yeah, if you read it, the arithmetic doesn't add up because it says the project budget is now $125,000. Doesn't say which includes the labor. It's a minor point, but you look at it, you're thinking, how do those two numbers add up to that amount? But I understand what you're saying. You're estimating the labor to be approximately $25,000.
As for, there are going to be some items that are not included on those bids that we, like cabling, for example. We're doubling the amount of access points we have in our county, and each one needs a wire run to it. So those are the sort of things that aren't eligible for reimbursement. They aren't on the bid, so we'll purchase them out of that, remaining.
You'll run the wire yourself.
Yeah.
This probably would get back to what Ms. Seabutt was saying earlier. If we had the monthly report, this would be something that would be reflecting in it as we see the process of the project moving along.
Not in the report she's requesting. That level of detail wouldn't be included in there.
You get to see almost every expenditure.
I'm sorry, but it just wouldn't. Because there are so many projects that go through those lines.
I think there's also going to be a delay between the time I complete a project
And the time you
request
get
for reimbursement.
reimbursed.
It's not like we're going to get a check right away. It's normally probably a 4 to 6 week process at least, which, I mean, I don't know what exactly you'll have to report, but that could play a factor.
Right.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve the amendment. It's $175,000 from the operating budget to the fund balance restricted for subsequent years' budget. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That amendment is approved, so that's...
Thank you.
Thank you. Student board member report.
Oh, I would like to congratulate her. You was in the paper for being on SAT, ACT Hall of Fame.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So, for Southern High School Student Council, we are starting the planning process to hold a bridal show in March, which is where I guess potential brides can come to different venues and see different venues will be represented at the show, and it's a fundraiser for us and it's a good thing for the county. and we're working with the school's PBIS system. We're planning to put together a team for the Pool Schools Deep Creek Dunk, and sending representatives to Advocacy Day in Annapolis and MASC in Ocean City, which are both during March. Then Northern High School, they have various upcoming projects and currently are deciding on the next charity to do a fundraiser for. Southern Middle School is also deciding on a charity to do a fundraiser for. And GCASC is planning a workshop for the Western Maryland Regional Retreat, which is March 8th and 9th, and planning Advocacy Day, which is March 6th. Additionally, congratulations to the 4 FTC teams from Garrett County who qualified for the state championship, which is Sunday, March 3rd. And as previously mentioned, congratulations to the Southern High School wrestling team, which are now state champions.
There you go.
Thank you. Questions for Katie?
That bridal thing will be held at the high school, or are they going to do it at a different?
I don't think that's been decided yet. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Board member updates.
Yeah, okay. I attended the LAC meeting on the 9th of January. I did send those minutes to all of you. Also sent the information that was passed out, and I got a lot out of it as far as how we were handling our careers and different things that the students kind of awards, or actually where they could go to work in different jobs once they leave the high school. So I thought that was interesting because that's been changing and we really hadn't had anything, definite on that. So I did get all that information out to you folks. I hope you don't mind me sending that, but I did feel like it was good information. Also, Beauty and the Beast, I'm looking forward to going to that. It's going to be held at Northern High School from the 13th through the 15th. So, yes.
We saw her preparing for them.
Yes.
Oh, I
Is
got
that
to.
this month or next month?
No, this.
This
month.
month.
This weekend.
Yeah.
Week.
Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Tomorrow. I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Any other?
I've been pretty busy this month. First off, I went to a policy meeting on 1/7/2019. I'm not going to discuss that because we spent an hour on it tonight. But the committee did go over those policies and did approve the policies in committee. And so thanks to the board for actually approving them tonight. We went to, I also met with the cabinet. Superintendent Baker was kind enough to bring me in and meet with all the people that are in her cabinet, and so I got to put faces to names, and that was very helpful. I also met with the lead team, and very, very good 2 hours, I think, spending with the cabinet members. On January 24th, I attended the Health Planning Council. Some of the things that they talked about, it was a health focus, the school health focus at the Health Planning Council. And the first thing we talked about is an adolescent well check committee. That was Dr. Schwam, Dr. Argabright, and Corder. And really, the problem here is children are not being seen by, adolescents are not being seen for well checks by their physicians. Garrett County is last in the state, so they're trying to work on initiatives that would improve that health status. One of the things they asked providers in a survey was, do you support, they asked physicians, would you support school-based health services or health clinics? And 95% of the physicians actually responded that they would support health services in the schools. Sadie Lillard talked about a speaker, Chris Herons, who used to be a player on the Boston Celtics. He struggled with crystal meth
addiction, something that we're seeing an increase in Garrett County. And so that speaker is coming to Garrett County in September, would probably be available in the schools, and I think that's, they're trying to schedule actually him talking to the students when he's down here, but pretty high-profile speaker. They also have a speaker bureau that if you call them, you can get teachers or schools can get speakers on a variety of issues: nutrition, marijuana use, alcohol prevention, opioids, financial impact of teen pregnancy, all those type things. So you need to call Sadie Liller at the Health Department, 301-334-7730, if you want to take advantage of that. After that meeting, I went to the Health and Wellness Committee meeting and basically talked about some of the same subjects, but also we talked about the immunization programs at the school. Compliance with immunizations are at about 100%, or they are at 100%. Flu mist may be available next year. Of course, you know that flu mist turned out to be, it wasn't too effective when we used it 2 or 3 years ago, and they've reformulated it, and now the efficacy has been improved. So it's possible that flu mist can be back in the elementary schools and middle schools and high schools in next year if the board decides that that's a good idea. I personally think it would be. After that meeting, I went down to the PACE reception, and I did get a chance to talk to some legislators down there about our funding, particularly the funding formulas. We're at disadvantage. I was really surprised. I talked to some members that were on the Kerwin Commission, or one particular member. Basically, he said, well, you guys are one of the poorest jurisdictions, so the funding all supports you. And I said, no, that's not true. So I think that actually, you know, we're looked at as the third wealthiest county in the state. And so I think there's some education that needs to go on with some of the Kerwin Commission members and also some of the legislators. I did talk to a legislator on the Eastern Shore, a friend of mine, that really totally got it. She said, yeah, we need to work on these funding formulas. And so that was productive, I think, to be down there to PACE and actually have one-on-one conversations. And I also talked to Delegate Edwards, Senator Edwards and Delegate Beitzel about this while we were down there. So I know you probably had similar conversations.
Did.
And finally, I visited 4 schools, Superintendent Baker, and met some great principals, great teachers, some great instructors. Saw some incredible programs that I didn't know were in these schools. And it was really wonderful to see the students so engaged. The biomedical innovation curriculum in Northern was very impressive. Their metal shop was very impressive. They've actually, you know, right out of high school, actually placed students in pretty good jobs. You know, I was really impressed with Northern Middle. The facilities were wonderful. We got to go to 8th grade classes, 7th grade classes, 6th grade classes, and there again, what I saw was really an engaged student population that was really wanting to learn and was doing and I think the teachers were doing a great job. Friendsville, we met down there with Mr. Friend, the principal, and did a tour of that, and then ended up in Accident Elementary School. And I know you all have gone through that, those type visits, but it was so valuable for me, being a new member on the board, to actually see these schools. And I'm going to continue to do that, I guess, in the next 2 or 3 months.
Yep.
So learned a lot. So sorry for the long report.
All right, that's great. Thanks for taking advantage of that. It's very beneficial. Yeah.
Anything else?
I got to go to Southern Northern basketball game, see Broadford's Orange Band play. That was good.
They're great. I love them.
Okay, that's our official business. There's some informational items there. I wish I was down to number 11, but we're not. So we will return to executive session, but let's take a 10-minute break.
Good. Yes, break.